Okay. The technical issues have subsided. We're good. We're good now. That was crazy. I feel like I am just I am a magnet for tech just not working ever. But okay, so welcome back, Lily. Hi, I'm Lily. This is the Chatty Juror. We're in it, we're on it, we're in it. Court has started. We'll probably do like 1.25 speed to catch up a little bit. Sorry about that. But okay, let's just get into it. Ronnie, yay! Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. Okay, and I might be flip-flopping between streams. This is Court TV. We were watching Law and Crime. But I think the sound right now is better on Court TV. So Trial Day 3. This is so exciting. Okay. Have closed captions, maybe? Here is court within the Fulton County of Norfolk. Draw near, give your attendance, you shall be heard. God save the Commonwealth and this court. Thank you.
Your Honor, this is 22-82117, the Commonwealth versus Karen Reed. Can I have
Mr. Lally?
Good morning, Your Honor. Laura McLaughlin.
On behalf of Ms. Reed, good morning, Your Honor.
Good morning, Mr. Jackson.
Elizabeth Little, also on behalf of Ms. Reed.
Good morning, Ms. Little.
Morning, Judge David Yannetti for Karen Reed.
Good morning, Mr. Yannetti. Good morning, Ms. Reed. Good morning, jurors. So I have to ask you those same 3 questions. Were you all able to follow the instructions and refrain from discussing this case with anyone?
I'm getting okay.
Everyone
All
said
right.
yes.
I had a bad Wi-Fi.
Were you
Oh
also
my
able to
gosh.
follow the instructions and refrain from doing any independent research or investigation?
Independent research.
Everyone said yes. Read anything about this case since we left here on Tuesday? Everyone said no or shook their heads. So, jurors, from time to time, I will give you instructions or talk to you for a few minutes about how you evaluate evidence. So I just want to take a couple of minutes today. It's part of my job, where my job is to teach the jury about the law. So in considering the testimony of any witness, please remember that questions are not evidence. Only the answers, which are in fact the only part of the exchange between the lawyer and the witness that are given under oath, are evidence. So if a witness is asked, isn't it true that after you learned that your uncle left you money in his will, you poisoned him? And the witness answers no. Based solely on that question and that answer, there's no evidence that the witness has an uncle, that the uncle had a will, that the uncle left the witness money, that the witness knew that he did, or that the witness poisoned him. So going forward, I want you to consider the evidence in that regard. Also, there were videos shown to you, and I expect that throughout the course of this trial, there'll be many more videos shown to you. Yes. These videos are evidence, and there's audio on these. So what the video shows is for you folks to decide, not me, not any of the lawyers. What an audio recording says is for you to decide, not me, not any of the lawyers, because you find the facts. That's your job. We all have different jobs, but finding the facts in the case is your job. Okay? So with that, please get the Commonwealth's witness back on the stand, Mr. Flamati.
That was clearly energized by what happened yesterday before the midday break. Yesterday, Tuesday, before the midday break. Just because, okay, so the problem is, for me, I still hear the question. And so no matter what the answer is, you can't unhear the question. If someone says, hey, did you unalive so-and-so? You're gonna remember the question, and you can't unhear it, but it should be disregarded. But we're humans. We're not robots. We're not AI. Yikes. Stop showing the audience. All right, we are picking up with Anthony Flamati. who is a lieutenant in the
Truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. So
All right, Mr. Lally, whenever you're ready.
we are about an hour. Oh my gosh, I'm getting like bad internet signals again.
Now, firefighter Flammato. Me.
This is so frustrating. I am so sorry.
And parking our apparatus close enough, especially at nighttime, that we can light up the scene as well as we can. Try and figure out how to approach a scene, because if we have to trek equipment farther distances, it can slow our response down. So we try and make sure our arrival and positioning is as best as we can.
Okay. And if they talk about the snow anymore, I will lose my brain because I don't know. Was it snowing? Was it snowing?
So I would have been the passenger of the ambulance. Usually the tech that's leading into the call will sit on the passenger side to try and mentally get ready for what's going on, whether it's reviewing protocols or just trying to assess the
Hopefully
information
that's
that's coming
the
across
last
the
of the
radio,
internet
so you can
issues.
update your treatment plan as much as you can before
Golly.
you even see the victim.
And when the ambulance comes to a stop for its parking positions, what if anything you see sort of as far as the scene is concerned?
So we have our fire apparatus that are helping light up the scene, but we also have two female parties going by to the victim on the side of the road, going back and forth between that person and the side of the road.
And from the position when you first arrive, are you able to see the person on the side?
You can see a shape of a person, so we know that's where the patient is, because we reported that there was a party on the side of the road. So seeing a body shape, that clued us that that was where we were headed.
In addition to the ambulance that you're in, how many other vehicles are on scene when you get there?
When I get there, I believe it is engine 3 and car 5.
And beyond sort of vehicles from your department, what if any other vehicles do you see when you get there?
If I remember correctly, it was just a personal vehicle. I don't remember if there's any police cars on scene at that time.
And from your orientation when you pull up, where is the body positioned? To your left, your right?
To my left.
And so after the ambulance is positioned, what do you do?
So then it's going to be bringing all the
Oh, I
equipment
wish
over
the
to the patient's
prosecution would
side,
speak up
to
a
be able
little
to
bit.
extricate them from that situation, whether it's a house or a street or a road. We assess where they are, and then the best tools to get them out into the ambulance to be able to work effectively on the patient.
When you proceed over to, now, again, at some points subsequent later on, are you able to identify who the person on the ground is?
Yes, we will try and get a general idea of the age of the patient, the positioning of the patient, how they were found, and then when we get them into the ambulance, we can start identifying ways to register that patient in the emergency room. So identifiers, whether it's a license or witnesses, or we try and figure out who they are so they can get registered at the hospital.
And at some point, were you able to identify who this person was?
That's correct. His wallet was in his pocket, and we were able to grab his license.
And who were you able to identify?
That was John O'Keefe.
And so, with reference to Mr. O'Keefe, when you first observed him on the ground, how far away from the street or the roadway is he at that point?
I would say approximately 10 feet away from the road.
And how is he positioned as far as how is his body positioned?
Yeah, so I think
I have to
overall
read-
he
I
was
believe he
about
was,
10 feet
supine
from the
on his
road,
back.
and he was supine on his back.
Just in general,
face to the
terms,
sky.
First, when you're responding to a call of this nature, what are some of the protocols that you're speaking about?
It is
What
going to
are you
be very repetitive.
seeking to do or assess when you first arrive?
So we're trying to determine
Very
if it's a
repetitive.
cardiac arrest, whether it's a viable transport or workable arrest. We have certain protocols within the Massachusetts protocols for whether we work the patient or we relieve the patient on scene if it's a police matter, if there's injuries not sustainable with life. So we're trying to make that assessment before we make any decisions.
Let me stop you there just for 1 second. You do use the term as far as cardiac arrest. Based on your training experience, what do you understand that?
So cardiac arrest, to the best of my knowledge, is just the cessation of electrical and mechanical activity in the cardiac muscle. So the cardiac muscle pumps blood throughout the body, and when that stops, all life stops after that.
Now,
Heart stopped.
in particular reference to the conditions, the weather conditions that you find.
Was it
what
in
kind of
80
analysis
degree
was
with
done,
sun?
to
You know what?
scale
I
effect
think,
with
Ray,
regards
I
to
think they
diagnosis?
should kind of
So cardiac arrest, depending on where they're found,
expand on the weather a little
we try
bit
and figure
more.
out
How
what led them to be at that
where
point.
are the winds?
So we're looking
gusty?
at weather conditions as well. That can also affect
Please describe the
viability of
gusts of
resuscitation.
wind.
So due to the extreme weather, extreme cold, we'll attempt resuscitation on that patient due to the fact that it'll prolong viability of the arrest or ability to recover from cardiac arrest afterwards. So weather is definitely a key factor in where they're found.
And you're familiar with the term based on your training experience called hypothermia.
Correct.
And so what, if any, sort of relationship does cardiac arrest have? Well, let me ask you this first. What is your understanding of the term hypothermia?
The exposure to extreme cold that lowers your core
What
and extremity
is
temperatures down to
hypothermia?
below 95 degrees usually.
And what, if any, interplay is there between hypothermia and cardiac arrest?
So like I said before, it'll prolong how long, it'll preserve the body after arrest. So if somebody's found in like a cold water situation, there's been multiple reports of patients recovering after being drowned in cold water for up to an hour. So viability is definitely improved by the cold weather.
And as far as viability is concerned, you talk about in your assessment. What are sort of the steps that go into your assessment?
So we're looking at obvious signs of death. So we're looking at exposure of brain matter. We're looking at traumatic injuries, decapitation, things that would basically be non-life sustainable. We're looking at signs of lividity and rigor to basically show us how long the patient has been down for.
And
how long had the patient been down for?
Does that have to your assessment?
So it'll show the extent of frailty the patient has. If somebody's an elderly patient, severe cancer patient, their ability to sustain a cardiac event like that is less. So somebody that's younger or middle-aged will have a much better chance of recovery afterwards. But that would really be the only key that we're looking at.
And what, if any, observations did you make of Mr. O'Keefe during your assessment of him initially?
Just that he was a middle-aged male, and that was all we had.
And as far as the other things that you're talking about, as far as viability of resuscitation, what, if anything, did you observe with reference to Mr. O'Keefe in regard to that?
So with viability, we were looking at any rigidity or rigor in the body, or lividity or separation of blood. You'd have a pooling of blood or bruising, it would look like at the lower parts of the body, depending on how the person's positioned, basically. If they're supine, you'd have positioning or pooling underneath the body. And then you would have stiffness of the arms, legs, jaw, neck. To be able to move the body, we're looking to, if they don't have those things present, it's another check mark of saying this is viable, we can work this.
And specifically as it applies to your assessment of Mr. O'Keefe, what, if anything, do you recall in regard to that initial assessment as far as viability?
So
Right.
his limbs were able to be moved, jaw was able to be moved. The posterior of his body was red, so not the indicative of lividity that we're looking for. So we termed it to be a viable arrest and continue to work.
And
So
mentioned
he
as far as
wasn't
sort of gathering
totally
equipment
gone.
handing over to Mr. O'Keefe, what, if any, equipment did you get?
So equipment initially is going to be our scoop stretcher to be able to pick the patient up, break
stretcher.
apart, put it underneath him.
We learned
have a
about that
first-in bag, an
yesterday.
airway bag, cardiac monitor. We'll bring all that over to the patient's side to be able to do as much as we can in that situation. But due to the weather, we wanted to get him out of the weather because that was one of the things that was hurting him at that point, was getting him into the warmer ambulance and beginning the warming process. So get into an area where we assess the patient thoroughly with good lighting and to be able to expose the patient, begin the warming process.
Right. Step 1,
And
we need to
when you
see.
go over to,
Step
where Mr.
2,
O'Keefe is,
get him warm. Step 3, is his heart beating?
If anyone from your department goes along.
So I have Matt Kelly with me and Tim Nuttall. I also have Frank Walsh, Katie McLaughlin, and Greg Woodbury, and Captain Robry.
And as far as this sort of initial assessment on the ground with Mr. O'Keefe, what, if anything, were sort of each of those?
Mr. O'Kill.
dealing with?
The captions aren't the best,
I'd have to review specific interventions.
but they do
as far
help
as who did
for
what, when.
when the prosecution
But,
can barely
That's why we document
speak
things
up.
immediately afterwards, so it's all fresh. So CPR was initiated by me and ALS assessment as well. So
And don't
I can
just
go
read
over
right from it.
individual interventions if you'd like, but it's really recall.
And for the record, sir, you're looking at exhibit number 160. And what page of that are you looking at?
It says 2 of 5 of my EMS report, but there's also the NFIRS report on the top as well.
It's not his. It shouldn't be his job to figure out the exhibit.
So
You
maybe
just
when you go over,
you
to
should
the
know what you
surgery,
gave them,
how many
right?
were sort of in that area at that time?
So in the area, we have the first responders, and then we have the 2 female parties on scene.
Where were the 2 females in
2 female parties or
So
3?
as we're approaching the scene, they were kind of in between us and the patient. So we try to gather as much information as we could from them as we could.
Where'd the 3rd one go? Because yesterday it was 3.
So once you make that determination,
Karen,
as far as
Carrie, and
liability
Jennifer.
of resuscitative efforts, sort of specifically, what are you and the other firefighters doing in regard to those efforts with Mr. O'Keefe?
So we're beginning CPR. We're trying to establish good quality CPR, get the patient onto our stretcher, begin an IO, start medication, start ventilating the patient. All of the conditions that the body has, we're trying to remedy through intervention. So we're trying to breathe for the patient. We're starting to press on his chest to do CPR to cause his cardiac muscle to compress, spread blood through the heart, cardiac muscle, cerebral brain, and we're trying to reverse what's happening in the body.
Now, as far as when Mr. O'Keefe, you observed him on the ground, what, if any, snow did you observe on or around him in that area?
So snow was probably up to the mid-axillary point, so we're looking at probably halfway up his rib point. Top of his body was clear.
And you know about how much snow was covering his body up to the mid-axillary?
I'd say probably about 4 inches, 4 to 6 inches.
Now, as far as your
4 to
observations
6 inches of
on the
snow.
ground, what, if any, observations did you make as far as how he was dressed?
For the exposure, I'd say he was pretty underdressed. Long sleeve t-shirt,
Underdressed.
jeans. Nothing really substantial to be out in that type of weather.
And at this point, or any subsequent point, what, if any, observations did you make of Mr. O'Keefe's footwear?
By the time so our first priority is obviously going to be treating the patient. His clothes do matter, but it's on the list of priorities, not huge. So by the time we figured out he was missing one of his shoes, we were already at the hospital at that point.
They didn't know he was missing a shoe until they were at
Do
the
you recall which of
hospital.
his shoes he was missing?
I don't.
And as far as that missing shoe, was that something that you or any of the other firefighters, paramedics would have needed to have removed on scene pursuant to any sort of treatment?
Nothing would have been done through the feet. It would have been just exposure of the patient to see possibly the extent of frostbite, if it had started affecting his extremities, fingers, nose, that type of thing, hypothermic reaction there.
Would that
So like they might have
have
taken a
been
shoe off, but
removed by one of
they
you
didn't
or
take a
one of
shoe
your
off.
firefighters while he was on the ground?
If it would have been removed, both of them would have been removed to assess that. It wouldn't do much good to just remove one and leave it there on scene.
One leg is very, very cold. That's crazy. So
Now,
so most likely,
as far as
I'm assuming from this
females,
testimony,
with,
he was missing a shoe as they arrived. So before they
did
arrived,
sort of
one
remain
shoe
in the
went
same
missing.
position? You initially observed them, did they move around or something?
They kind of cleared a little bit away from the scene. I would say they moved off to the right of the apparatus so we could work on the patient at that time.
And what, if any, conversation or what, if anything, did you ask either of those two?
So how the patient was found and what brought them to that situation is critical. So we're trying to figure out as much information past medical history that we can of the patient. So we're trying to find somebody who has knowledge of the event. So as we approach the scene, begin to talk to one of the females. What is going on? Why are they there? Just what happened?
And,
Who, what, the who, the W's, the who, what, why
females, is that correct?
That's
type of energy.
Any of those females in Portland, is that
That's correct, Ms. Reed.
you identify as where Mr. Reed is seated or not?
Right there.
That's the record reflected.
Okay.
Now, with regard,
She's right there.
who
Everyone
was
knows what she looks like.
talking to? Was that Ms. Reed or was that somebody else?
That was Ms. Reed.
And Why, if at all, were you talking to her versus one of the other females that you?
She seemed to be the one that was most personally affected by it, so figured she'd had the most information about why the person was there.
Right. She was freaking out the
What
most.
observations did you make of her in regard to your conclusion that she was the one who was the most personally affected?
She was the most distressed on scene, obviously upset, so personally related to or had a relationship with the person.
Right. She was running around like a chicken with the head cut off. They said that
Before we get
in
to
Tuesday.
the conversations, what, if anything, did you observe Ms. Reed or any of the females doing with reference to Mr. O'Keefe's body when you first started to come up to the scene?
So I would characterize it as an attempted resuscitation. She was attempting to do CPR, but due to the erratic behavior, she was running back and forth between the other female on scene and the body, back and forth, trying to press on his chest, wake him up, talk to him, just to no avail.
So she was just kind of skedaddling back and forth, trying to pump his chest, getting freaked out, running away, talking to people, like screaming, oh, and then
So do you
going
have any
back.
information of who this is? How are they here? Try to get any type of information we could from her at that time.
How are
With no
they
luck.
here?
When you say with no luck, what, if anything, what if any response did you receive from Ms. Reed in regards to your question?
So the only response that I was personally given was just, I hit him. Oh my God, I hit him.
Okay, so here we get more of the I hit him, I hit him.
Oh my God, how loudly?
So she was within 2 feet of me, but very loud. Any type of follow-up questioning, did you hit him with your hand? Did you kick him? What happened? She just repeated the phrase over and over again, I hit him, I hit him.
It's very interesting that no officer so far that testified heard her say, I hit him, but the EMTs heard her say, I hit him.
This was as we're bringing equipment over to the patient.
Especially if she
The
was
interventions
yelling.
are going to be
Hi,
started basically
Mike,
by
what's going
whoever
on?
gets over to the scene first. I'm trying to gather information as a lead paramedic to try and coordinate interventions and therapy to
We had so
kind
much
of holistically be the team leader in that situation.
And by internet drama, I
do
mean drama
transport the
with the
patient.
internet.
So it was on approach to the patient, probably halfway between the ambulance and the patient.
And with regard to that treatment of Mr. O'Keefe, like you referenced it earlier being in your report, what were sort of those steps or what, if anything, did you and the other firefighters do with regard to treatment? Before you answer that, Your Honor, may I request, may the witness just refer to the EMS report as it goes?
Yes, if need be.
So we try and document through our flow chart of all of the interventions that we're doing. So CPR is obviously going to be our first priority. CPR is initiated,
Refer to
unchanged,
it.
but
Don't
successful in the actual
don't read
intervention
directly
itself, no
from it.
complications. We do our ALS assessment that we talked about of any further indications of this is not a viable arrest. We determined it was a viable arrest and we move on.
Okay.
Then we're going to start,
I mean,
we
like,
refer to it as a bag valve mask at 15
it's the
liters per minute on
process.
oxygen. The patient's not
even
breathing
if
on
he
their
wasn't
own, so
reading,
we're
he
trying
probably
to
was doing
assist
really good
ventilating that with high
guesses
flow oxygen as well.
on the process.
And easy IO,
'cause
which is a
probably
needle we put
mostly
into
the
the
same
bone of the
always.
tibia of the patient. That was on the right tibia was the first one we put in. We're going to be putting in warm fluid. We have a warmer in the back to be able to bring up the core temperature.
That must feel
Then we start with
crazy.
epinephrine, 1 milligram through that IO.
If I could just stop you there for 1 second. When you say as far as IO and put it into the leg, how is that sort of inserted into the leg?
So we have two different methods we can do. We have a drill, a power drill that drills through the outer layer of the bone into the capillary area of the bone, soft but spongy material.
I
So
wasn't
we drill
ready.
through that, or we can do it by hand if that fails.
I wasn't ready. I wasn't
When it
ready.
comes to the epinephrine, what is sort of
The words drill and bone just send tingles down
So
my
that medication
spine.
will
Ugh.
improve. It's a vasoconstrictor. It'll cause the vasculature to constrict. So it'll improve the quality or effectiveness on the cardiac muscle, cardiac vasculature, and the cerebral area.
As far as the administration of epinephrine is concerned, is that something that's done once or more than once? And is there a protocol for that?
So it's going to be serial every 3 to 5 minutes during the cardiac arrest to try and bring them over to the hospital. So it continues that entire time unless there's a rhythm change or that can change our algorithm of how we approach the patient. If there's a rhythm regain or return of spontaneous circulation.
And so how many times or what times was the epinephrine administered via the IO to Mr. O'Keefe?
So I have epinephrine at 620, 625, 630,
Every 5 minutes.
635, 640, 645.
And when was that first administered? Would that have been at some point when he was outside of the ambulance on the ground or in the ambulance or something?
Be dependent on transport time. So first, we're at patient side at 6:15, transport 6:27. So best estimation would
Why
have been
do I
inside the
have
ambulance
bad
at that point.
internet alert?
I'm sorry I interrupted you before, but after sort of the introduction of the epinephrine, what if anything you do in the other firefighter?
After the first round? Yeah. So first round of epinephrine. After that, we would drop in what's called an OPA. That would be to push the tongue out of the way, open up the airway to improve our bag valve mass, so it has an open air way to get the oxygen into the lungs. We begin external warming, stripping the patient, getting the heat turned up in the back of the ambulance. We would then switch over from manual CPR done by hand to a mechanical CPR device to ensure adequate, consistent CPR compressions of the chest. It was a Lucas device.
High quality, consistent
on the patient.
CPR.
And then we continue with another round of epi. Patient's starting to warm up at this time, so we would do suction at that point to try and suction fluid out of the airway to improve ventilation efforts.
Hi, good boy.
Another round of epi is done. We have another suction, this time through a deep suction via the endotracheal tube. Sorry, at 6:22, after warming, we intubated the patient. We have a 7.5 tube paced at 27 centimeters, and then verified through various means, through chest rise, auscultation, waveform, and tidal CO2. So we had complications listed as patient vomiting, aspirating. Suction was then done with a rigid tip suction device. After successful intubation, we then suctioned via French tube through the airway established. Jump back up to
Yes,
31.
Ashy-Man.
Another IO line was established
Did you hear his little tippy
on
taps?
the opposite tibia on the left side.
This is the cutest thing.
And then another 3 rounds of epi, and then arrival at the hospital.
What was the arrival time at the hospital?
You hear the faint sound of Dan.
At destination was 6:45.
What hospital was that again? I'm sorry.
Good Samaritan Medical Center.
There's a term that you use in your reports called, and I'll probably butcher this, but asystole, is that correct?
Yeah, asystole is going to be a cardiac rhythm where there's no electrical activity in the heart and is referred to as flatline.
What, if any,
The lawyers keep saying asystole,
diagnosis?
and the EMTs keep like slightly correcting him with like asystole.
So that was the rhythm he was found in.
I love that energy.
From
Like,
initial rhythm,
yeah, you
I have
can
an
say it that
EKG
way,
at
but this is
6:32 is
all the
asystole.
professionals say it.
So we basically observe that for any changes, whether it's increase of electrical activity, regain of adequate pulses, all of that can kind of be hinted at with the cardiac rhythm. And then we would change our algorithm based on whether we go down the ROSC protocol or we continue down the cardiac arrest protocol.
And whether it's on scene or it's in the ambulance, is there sort of a division of task or a division of different skill that's being employed in patient care?
So patient care will have to do with level of training and also proximity on the patient. Where you get into the ambulance is just logistically, if you have the training, it's not a huge open ER, it's a small environment. So we try and not have people jump over each other as best as we can.
And if you recall, who was sort of doing what in relation to treatment of this patient?
So in the back of the ambulance specifically, okay, in the back of the ambulance, Tim Nuttall was managing the airway. I was the team lead that was kind of coordinating all of the interventions. Matt Kelly was assisting in gathering equipment, doing CPR before the mechanical device was placed on. Basically, they act as an assistant to hand equipment, place things in strategic areas around so we can actually work without having to go get those physical things ourselves.
Now, as far as you indicated removal of Mr. O'Keefe's clothing once in the ambulance, correct?
Yes.
What was it about sort of the condition of clothing that led to the removal of that?
So removal of clothing is actually pretty standard for any cardiac arrest, any traumatic injuries. We're basically trying to get further clues. This is all happening very quickly. So we're trying to get more evidence of why are they here. We're looking for extremity injuries, crush injuries, bruising, anything that we could document, that we could pass on to the emergency room staff and doctors. So we would strip most patients.
And as far as were you involved personally, as far as sort of cutting the clothing and stripping the patient?
Yes.
And upon removal of the clothing, what, if anything, did you observe as to sort of the condition of the clothing or texture of the clothing?
Condition seems pretty well intact, but just wet and cold.
And what, if any, relationship with the wet and cold
Well
clothing have
intact,
any of the,
just
diagnoses
wet and
that you
cold.
were, running through in regard to this?
It would really just be the exposure to the weather would be our biggest trigger off of that, or if you had protruding injuries through the clothing, compound fractures, things like that. The clothing was intact, but we knew it was wet, it was cold. So as we strip things off of him, we can see underneath, basically, if there are any not every fracture breaks through the skin, not everything causes obvious things, obvious signs. So
Right.
as we strip the patient, we can begin to further assess.
Take you back just for a second to outside of the ambulance. What, if anything, specifically were you able to observe with reference to any injuries Mr. O'Keefe has sustained?
Injuries are pretty tough to see outside of the ambulance just due to the weather, due to the lighting.
What was the
We
weather
have
like?
seen lighting on the ambulance as well, but
Let me ask you,
Yeah.
as far as what, if any, difference did you know between the lighting in the back of the ambulance versus when you were with Mr. O'Keefe on the ground?
so he was
Yeah,
still
let's
out in the
talk
weather at
about
that point,
how
so bleeding
sun
wasn't
wasn't
really
up and it
obvious at
was
that point.
snowing,
As soon as we get him
and
into
it
the back
was
of the
cold.
ambulance, then we start
And
noticing hemorrhage
with
from
the
different
no
areas of his
sun
body.
and no street lights, there's no light, and then ambulance has lights.
So mostly from his mouth, his eyes, nose.
The point of the point of having a jury is so that,
Just to be
like,
clear for the record, when you
they're
use
not
the term
supposed to
hemorrhage
just
based
be
on your training
assume.
experience, what do you understand that?
Bleeding, external bleeding.
It's just like you.
Now, you
But-
mentioned that there was some suctioning of Mr. O'Keefe's airway, is that
I
correct?
think if two witnesses say there's no
What, if
street lights,
anything,
it's knowing
specifically
the
was
sun
suctioned
isn't
from
up
Mr.
yet.
O'Keefe's?
I think
Suction from the airway was mostly blood,
To
blood,
assume
sputum.
that
And,
the ambulance EMTs, fire department, who were there at the same exact
what, if
time, also
what, if
couldn't
anything, you
see
have to sort of measure how much,
because
blood was suctioned
the
out?
sun wasn't up and it was snowing.
So we have a
But
a canister that has marks of
covered.
milliliters,
I get
so we can
that,
determine as we're
because, like,
suctioning how much
Jurors can't
is in that
just
container at
assume.
different
They
times.
have to go off of the evidence.
And,
But
how much based
you
on
know,
that, was suctioned from Mr. O'Keefe's airway?
I
So
think
the
everyone
initial
will remember that
suctioning with the rigid tip
It was
was about
fun.
150 milliliters.
it was a
And subsequently,
blizzard-like conditions.
so that would have been
Bishop demands
above the airway, in the
how
mouth, in that type of area. We established the
They got to the
intubation,
hospital.
and then deep suctioning with that soft tip through the intubation tube would have been another 50 milliliters of fluid.
If they stripped him in the ambulance, how didn't they know his shoe was missing until he got to the hospital? I don't think they were even really like, okay, so this is a great, actually, like a great question that I also have. Okay, so what was his name? Timothy Nuttall made mention, especially in the cross-examination, about the cutting of the clothes, the removing of the clothes, and that he was dressed pretty much well for the blizzard-like conditions. He made mention about cutting the coat and how, if you have a big fluffy coat, he didn't say that he had a big fluffy coat on, but he kind of hinted at him having at least layers on of some sort. And why is the internet giving me this alert again? Oh my goodness. So he made mention of him cutting off at least layers, like removing at least layers from John. But I don't think they would even make a note or have the energy or care to make a note that a shoe was missing. The only thing that they're caring about right now is preserving life. And they don't even
Now, with
do
reference
anything
to-
with the
you
clothes
mentioned
except
some
throw them on the
observations
floor of the
versus,
hospital
back
room
then.
or on
What's
like
that?
the
Sorry.
gurney
You
as
mentioned
they're
some
going
observations
in.
made for your, reference to Mr. O'Keefe's
Hopefully
back.
you
Yes.
And what were those again?
So that would have been redness of the skin of the posterior of the body.
What, if any, significance does that have to you as far as your observation?
So redness from the skin, if it's general across the body, can mean certain things. If it's just a particular area, and due to the fact that it was cold outside, that would have been the initial stages of frostbite or exposure to cold.
And as far as the remainder of Mr. O'Keefe's body, what, if any, other observations did you make? In which areas did you make those observations in regard to the initial state?
So for as far as the cold exposure, cold exposure, we're looking at the most exterior parts. Extreme cold exposure can lead to frost nip and frostbite in different areas. The first affected areas are going to be your fingers, your ears, your nose, your toes, that type of. So that was a cold, waxy, pale, stark white substance, basically, or condition of the skin.
And on each of those areas that you just described?
Yes.
Now, sort of up in the area of Mr. O'Keefe's head, you mentioned some bleeding from the eyes and the nose, correct?
Yes.
As well as his mouth?
Yes.
And beyond that, what, if any, observations did you make of any other sort of injuries to his head or his?
Where did the pool
So
of blood come
his eyes
from?
were pretty well swollen. We were trying to clear areas of blood to figure out if there were any contusions around the head. I believe there was a contusion on his forehead.
Hand
Also
and
had
egg on
some
the head.
markings on his extremities as well.
And just as far as your understanding, based on your training experience, when you use the word contusion, what do you understand that?
Bruising.
Bruising.
Before we get to the
covered in
extremities, what, if any,
bruises,
observations did you make
which
as
is
far as-
a question that I asked yesterday. How fast?
Abdomen we noted
does
as
bruises
significant
happen?
as distension or swelling of the belly.
And what, if any, significance did that have to you with regards to?
Internal bleeding.
It's another of our detailed assessments. We go through the body in a more detailed way to try and find more clues that we can pass on for the assessment. Distension in the belly could be due to trauma or bloating. It could be, those are usually our biggest triggers for distension.
But what causes the
You
bloating?
mentioned, as far as the
trauma?
extremities are concerned, what, if anything, did you observe as far as injuries from Mr. O'Keefe's?
So we're looking at, so we had the cold, rigid fingers, hands,
Because I don't know. I don't know.
feet,
I don't
and
know.
we had
medical
multiple
stuff.
dry blood
I
lacerations to the
am
right
breathing.
arm.
Do you recall specifically where on Mr. O'Keefe's right arm?
Would have been his upper arm.
Upper arm, and he
You
said
mentioned,
that
dry blood, is that correct?
Timothy
Yes.
said yesterday
So,
that there were
I'm-
furrows, furrows,
No.
Now, as far as
like removing of the skin.
being dry blood versus actively bleeding, what, if anything, does that indicate to you as far as sort of timing?
So we had active bleeding from other areas in the body. So the fact that it had already stopped and clotted, I would assume that would have been several hours before the incident that led him to be there, but I would guess earlier in the evening.
Okay, this is the first time we're getting like an idea of the time the injuries occurred to when he was found. So we're at least given a range of possibly several hours before he was found he was injured.
Now, as far as the history is concerned, your attempts on scene, and then what, if any, attempts were made subsequent when you were in the ambulance to obtain any sort of history of how Mr. O'Keefe can be there, or what, if any, can cause the injuries you observed?
Once we get the patient into the ambulance, there was no family, no bystanders in the back of the ambulance, so then it's going to be solely based on physical assessment.
And within sort of the team of firefighters that you had,
Why does he not have a microphone?
Try and obtain that information while you went back.
So that would have been Katie McLaughlin.
And what did you ask Mr. McLaughlin?
So Katie was one of our senior paramedics at the time. So we had enough skilled hands working on the patient at that time. So to direct her, I wasn't able to get as much information and still had a skill to do or still had a task to do to run the cardiac arrest. So I directed Ms. Reed over to Katie to try and gather more information
I physically moved
as to
her.
why they were there. If you could get any more information about who he was, events leading to the injury, how long he was down for, any type of information, and then moved on to the patient at that point.
And so firefighter McLaughlin is having this conversation outside of the ambulance, is that correct?
That's correct.
This is going on while you're inside of the ambulance actively treating Mr. O'Keefe.
It was a very quick process. So I start the conversation, wasn't productive, wasn't moving forward, moved her over to firefighter McLaughlin, continued on to the patient, and then started treatment, moved the patient in, and then Katie came into the back of the ambulance to help. So it was a very quick process.
Now, as far as Mr. O'Keefe's eyes were concerned, what, if any, observations further did you make as far as Mr. O'Keefe's eyes?
So both eyes were swollen and bleeding.
What, if any, observations were you able to make of his pupils?
I'm sorry, what?
Pupils?
Pupils. So I've documented as 4 millimeters and non-reactive.
What, if any, significance is those observations as far as the 4 millimeters non-reactive?
So we're looking for equality between the two. So signs of bleeding can be demonstrated by unequal pupils, or if they were restricted, could lead us to believe it was as a result of an opioid interaction. But we're looking at whether they react to light as well. If there's brain activity, if there's still something causing the body to react, you'll have some type of pupillary response. So we shine light, there was no response, so it was fixed and at 4 millimeters.
Now, at some point, you leave the scene in room to Good Samaritan, is that correct?
That's correct.
And who is continuing treatment of Mr. O'Keefe in the back of the ambulance during transport?
So back in the ambulance and transport would have been Firefighter Kelly, Firefighter Nuttall, and myself.
And who, if anyone, was driving the ambulance between Fairview and?
Already gone over this.
So that'll be determined by basically just positioning on the engine. So the step driver for that position would then drive as the detailed person over to the ambulance, and that was Firefighter McLaughlin.
Now, during the transport from Fairview to Good Samaritan, what, if anything, are you and the other firefighters in the back of the ambulance doing as far as continuing treatment of Mr. O'Keefe?
So we started transport at 6:27. So
Right.
between 6:27 and 6:45,
It took a while to get there
treatments included epinephrine, additional suctioning, managing the airway,
because
placing another intraosseous line. and then 3
I think
additional
it was
rounds
like blizzard-like
of
conditions.
epinephrine
They
while
said that like
the
once or
mechanical
twice
CPR is continuing CPR.
that it was blizzard-like
And during the course
conditions.
of the transport, what if any changes in Mr. O'Keefe's status as far as cardiac arrest or breathing occurred during the transport?
No changes.
Now, that time that it took to get from Fairview to Good Samaritan, is that sort of a typical transport time?
Not normally. Due to the weather, it was pretty slow driving. Even though the ambulance is a smaller vehicle than the engine, slow transport.
What
compared to
was the
normal.
weather like?
During the course of the transport, what if any communication
was the weather
was
like?
happened with Good Samaritan in regard to Mr. O'Keefe and his eventual arrival there?
Every medical that goes on, we try to give the hospital staff a heads up basically of what's coming in. We'll have different alerts that we would give them, whether it's cardiac arrest, a stroke, a STEMI, to have the certain appropriate teams come in and be ready, whether it's a trauma alert. There's different specialties within the hospital that'll treat those different particular cases. So we call them 5 to 10 minutes prior to give that team time to get down into the emergency room to get ready to work.
When you arrived at Good Samaritan,
ready to
who,
work.
if anyone, were you met by and sort of what happened with regard to Mr. O'Keefe?
So we're continuing interventions from the ambulance through the bay into their cold room. We're then met by registration, a registered nurse, and the doctor that took care of the patient, as well as a team of other assistants and CNAs.
And where do you physically go with Mr. O'Keefe, or how does that work?
Yep, so that's referred to as a transfer of care. So there's different people, like I said, it's a team base where different people are in charge of different things. You'll have the nurse in charge that's in charge of documenting our interventions that have been done so far, time of down,
That's fair.
patient was down, and then she starts documenting
feel
all the
like
different
documentating is such a
interventions
good
that were
word.
done by the
It's
hospital
such a
staff as
better
well.
word.
You also give a report
guess
to
I'm
the
not one to
doctor
add my
who's then
opinion.
taking over as lead for the cardiac arrest. They're going to start issuing orders for the patient and treatment. And then you have registration that will get the information to register the patient that they can tie all of their interventions to.
Yep, and so they can charge them.
That sort of process of exchange of information, things of that nature. What if
Don't
anything
forget that part.
with regard to,
Who gets charged for all of this?
So add that assessment, I believe he had a core body temperature of 80 degrees.
Oof,
what, if
that's
any,
low.
significance does that have in regard to sort of typical core body temperature?
Typical core body temperature is going to be in the high 90s. Where body temperature being at 80 with a rectal temp, a core temp, is going to be extreme hypothermia.
Now,
Extreme hypothermia. Yikes. Poor
you're at
guy.
Good Samaritan for a certain amount of time, correct, before you cleared?
Correct.
And at that point in time, while you were at Good Samaritan, that initial time, what, if anything, did you learn as far as Mr. O'Keefe's status or what had happened?
So as we talked about before with the hypothermia and the extreme cold, they're going to work that for an extended period of time. Most cardiac arrests, I will try and hang out by the patient or in the area. As new staff come through, different things are found. The doctors and nurses might have follow-up questions. So I try to stay available as an asset that they can bounce those questions off, at least for 10 or 15 minutes afterwards, to make sure the whole process is completely transferred from all the interested parties.
That's good.
During that course of time, what, if anything?
They don't just drop them off and run.
Eventual status of Mr. O'Keefe.
We didn't learn anything while we were at the hospital. We then cleared the hospital, returned back to quarters to decon the ambulance and to replenish all the equipment that we had used, get back in service, and move on with the shift.
At some point during the course of the shift, did you have occasion to go back to Good Samaritan?
Me personally, no. It would have been for an additional medical call if there was any calls for service afterwards.
Did you recall whether or not you went back to Good Samaritan for any additional medical calls or anything of that nature?
I don't recall.
So if I could direct your attention to the screen just over there.
Video or picture.
Ms. Gilman, if I could please have
Media.
number 9.
Exhibit number 9. Gosh, can they please get him a microphone? It's going to be a long freaking trial if we are still on witness number 6.
So directing your attention to what's been previously marked as exhibit number 9 up on the screen. Do you recognize what's in that photograph?
Is this a good
The
representation
house.
of the weather that night?
Is that the house that you responded to? Is that correct? And, Ms. Gilman, if I
Describe
have
the
exhibit
wind.
number- Ms. Gilman, if I could have exhibit number 14.
The red.
What's up on screen? Do you recognize what that is?
I see blood, snow, general area, not sure.
And lastly, Mr. Gilman, if I could have exhibit number 18. And again,
It is such a massive flagpole.
On screen is exhibit number 18.
Yes.
Can I approach the witness room?
Yes.
Every time I see it, I'm like, that's a really big flagpole. Who gets a flagpole that big? A cop,
Just start my hand with a laser pointer. Basically, just press on this button here.
high level police officer, Boston PD.
So firefighter Flamati, within this
Maybe?
photograph up on the screen is exhibit 18. Do you see the area in which you observed Mr. O'Keefe's lying on the ground when you first arrived?
Yes.
And using that laser pointer, could you direct the jury's attention to where in this photograph you observed Mr. O'Keefe initially arrived?
Initially arrived. Would have
The
been.
man behind the screen. It's probably a bailiff, but it looked like his
Can I have just, one moment
face was
now?
the screen.
Yes. If you could turn, thank you.
Nothing further for this witness at this time.
All right, cross-examination.
Cross-examination.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Morning. Good morning.
I'd like to start
Good, almost
sort of at the
afternoon.
beginning. When you first arrived
Yes.
at the location, you indicated that you could, in fact, see the body from your perspective, correct?
I can see a body. Yes.
And I think you indicated the shape of the body.
Yeah.
Couldn't tell if it was female or male,
Right.
but obviously
Due
looked
to the weather.
like a human figure.
Yes.
Okay. That drew your attention to the left side of the ambulance as you were approaching, correct?
Yes.
And you're sitting on the right side, which means you're sort of the furthest away from that figure from the perspective of the ambulance.
And the ambulance. Yes.
And you had no problem making out that figure in the snow.
The figure in the snow. We had good distance between the ambulance and the engine. So yes.
Okay. And you indicated that the figure in the snow was on top of the snow, if you will, with some snow accumulating up the body of the individual.
Yes.
But he was not covered in snow.
No.
There wasn't like a mound of snow over this figure.
There were mounds of snow in the area, but not over the patient. Due to the wind, there were snow drifts in the area.
And his clothes were dark as compared to the white snow.
Yes.
Snowdrifts. Wind. Tell me about the
I want to
gut.
ask you a couple of quick questions about some of the last conversation you had with Mr. Lally about the injuries. You did note that Mr. O'Keefe had a laceration over his right eye, correct?
No, over his right eye.
Over his right eye.
The contusion over the eye.
Okay, and your definition of a contusion is,
Bruising.
was it also swollen?
There was swelling around the eyes and a little bit of contusion and bruising around.
Did you see an actively bleeding laceration over his right eye?
I don't recall.
You don't remember that? What about his left eye?
Both eyes were pretty well swollen shut.
What about not on
Eyes
the
were-
nostrils, but on the skin on the nose? Did you note a laceration or multiple lacerations on the nose?
So due to the bleeding that was coming from the orifices, trying to clean the area and find exactly where it's from is sometimes difficult. So we can just say it was bleeding in that area.
Okay, so you can't define, as you sit here, you don't remember if it was bleeding from the nostril or from a laceration on the nose?
I believe it was the nostrils.
Are you saying that there was no laceration on the skin of the nose, or you just don't recall
On the top of the nose, no, I don't know.
it? I'm sorry,
On the top of the nose, I don't recall.
you don't recall.
He doesn't think there was a
With regard
laceration
to
figure. He thinks
his
it was like,
abdomen,
like
you
a
indicated
bloody
it was
nose.
distended,
Yes.
a medical term for swollen.
Yep.
You said
Thank you,
that
yes.
could be from trauma or it could be just bloating, correct?
Correct.
Did you notice any contusions on his abdomen?
No.
Any skin that was abraded?
No.
Or cut?
No.
So there's no bruising, no contusion, but there was a distension, correct?
Yes.
So there was no visible trauma to the abdomen.
Visible trauma doesn't really matter to internal trauma. It's not always indicative one way or the other.
Right, so there's
my
the bloating
question was,
because
did
of
you
internal
see
bleeding.
But you did note that it was bloated.
That it was descended. Yeah.
Distended. Do you
I want to talk to you for a second
That's
about,
fine.
if I can
Don't
shift
assume.
gears, about the
You can't assume.
conversation
Don't
you
assume.
indicated to Mr.
Tell
Lowry.
me
you
the
had with Ms.
facts.
Reed. You were also asked about that conversation at the grand jury when you testified, correct?
Correct.
You testified that as the lead paramedic, you were specifically trying to get as much information from my client, Ms. Reed, as you possibly could concerning the victim and how the victim ended up being there, correct?
right because she was the most freaked out.
You
So,
indicated-
like, of course.
In no particular order, that you asked questions like, how do you know him, correct?
Correct.
How did he get here?
Correct.
What happened?
Correct.
Is there any additional information you can give me about what happened to this person?
Correct.
Okay, so that was a conversation that you were personally engaged in
And then
with my client.
She
in
just
order to
responded, I hit him, I hit him, I hit him,
gather
I
as
hit him.
much data, if you will,
How?
about what
What?
you were dealing with, correct?
Correct.
But your focus was, when you first arrived, your focus is, I need to attend to the patient, correct?
Correct.
Like
As it should
conversations
be.
notwithstanding, I need to deal with what's in front of me, which is an unconscious man in the snow,
Yes.
dressed
Non-responsive.
inappropriately,
Correct.
and possibly freezing to death.
Correct.
But you did say that you had enough of a conversation with Ms. Reed that she answered you and said something to the effect of, I hit him, oh my God, I hit him.
Correct.
So then you followed up on that conversation, correct?
As much as I could, yes.
As a matter of fact, you said that you asked her additional elaborating questions.
Correct.
Well, did you hit him in the face? Or did you kick him? Did you hit him with your hand?
Right. Tell me how, why,
So that's a
how did you
conversation
hit
that
him?
you're
With
having
what?
With
That will help
with Ms. Reed,
fixing him.
face-to-face.
Correct.
You're talking to her, you're looking her in the eyes, she's looking you in the eyes, you're standing still, and you're attempting as best you can to converse with this woman so that you can gather as much information as you possibly can as you attend to the victim.
Correct.
You indicated that that conversation lasted long enough that the conversation was frustrated by the fact that you weren't getting information that was helpful to you. So you turned that conversation over to Katie McLaughlin.
Objection? Sustained. Ask it a different way.
Sure. Did you have, was your conversation in some way in your mind, and when I use the word frustrated, I mean, it was just, you weren't getting the information that you were seeking, correct?
It wasn't productive.
Okay, better way to put it. I'll use your word. That conversation was unproductive enough that you then moved the conversation over to Ms. McLaughlin, correct?
Correct.
Firefighter McLaughlin. And once Firefighter McLaughlin engaged Ms. Reed,
You take care of
you
it.
then began to.
I'm trying to save a life.
So the patient was already being treated by the other personnel on scene.
Okay.
I started the conversation, realized it wasn't going anywhere. I had other responsibilities. So regardless of how they ended there, they still needed treatment
Of course.
and transport. So that began my priority and moved her over to try and get as much information while treatment was being done.
What part of the treatment were you responsible for?
All of it.
Sorry, that's a great answer to a very vague question. What physically were you doing with Mr.
Right.
O'Keefe?
Respect the man who is
in which particular-
power, like the
When you
lead.
first arrived and attended to him and physically touched him. In other
emergency
words, were you
medical
the airway person? Were you the cardiac person? Were you doing chest compressions? Were you squeezing the bag?
I would have been doing chest compressions initially until I could delegate that task to somebody else.
Okay.
Like if something
And
goes
chest
wrong, it's all
compressions,
going to go back
I'm
on
going to
him.
butcher this because I've never
essentially,
been trained other than
he's
my
the lead.
toddler.
He's the
They
man.
look a little like what I'm doing now, correct?
Correct.
And I indicated palm over one palm over my hand, arms extended, and you can see my shoulders moving up and down in a rhythmic fashion, correct? So if
I didn't get an answer, correct?
yes, I'll wait till then.
Sirens. They're
What
so
were you wearing?
close. Courthouses.
What are they wearing?
police,
My uniform.
ambulances.
Didn't expect that one, did you?
That's a different one. Heavy winter coat,
Okay.
uniform.
Do paramedics wear sometimes bright yellow for safety?
Yes.
Were you wearing a bright yellow heavy winter coat?
I don't recall. I have a few different coats.
Got it. Do you remember what Miss McLaughlin was wearing?
I don't.
Okay.
He's like, I don't
That
remember
conversation
what
you
anyone was
had with
wearing.
Ms. Reed
I
at
remember
the scene,
trying to save a life.
that had to have lasted, I'm not guessing it was very long, but it had to have lasted a minute
At most, yeah.
at most.
Very short conversation with Karen.
Once you finished your conversation with Ms. Reed, did you then start attending specifically to the chest compressions and the high-level CPR that we've heard so much about from your colleague?
Yes.
As you're doing the CPR on the scene, that high-level CPR, high-quality CPR, was Mr. O'Keefe then moved to
Keep using their word.
then facilitate getting him on a
Very
gurney.
smart.
That gurney was then moved between a couple of patrol cars, cruisers, and into the ambulance, correct?
Correct.
Once you were in the ambulance, the first priority is to get this person warm. Is that right?
First priority is always going to be CPR. The secondary would be getting them warmed up.
Okay. So obviously, when you got into the ambulance, you shut the doors. There's a heater on in the ambulance.
Yes.
You never came back out of that ambulance after you got Mr. O'Keefe into the ambulance, did you?
No.
Okay. And you were in there with firefighter Nuttall at the time?
Nuttall and Kelly.
And firefighter McLaughlin was outside the ambulance doing whatever she was doing.
Correct. Initially, and then she came in afterwards to
Obviously.
assist. Yeah.
And did I hear you correctly? When firefighter McLaughlin got in the ambulance, she took over the driving responsibilities?
So there's two different compartments. They're not connected. There's a little window between the two areas. So she assisted with interventions in the back. And then after we had established everything we needed to on scene to begin transport, she then got out and then started driving.
Got it. Thank you. I'd like to play, but first I'd like to have marked. I think it's already been marked. Exhibit 379. It's a video, a snippet of a video. It's probably 3 minutes long. It's not that long. I'd like to play that portion of the video
379.
for you. And when it's done, firefighter Nuttall, sorry, I'm looking at the wrong notes. Firefighter Flamati, which is not that easy to say.
Did a great job.
I'm going to ask you to show me exactly where on the video, if you can,
Seems
that you have
personable.
this conversation.
For the laser
The
pointer,
witness,
My client.
comfortable.
Yes, you can use the laser pointer
As
if you
you
wish.
eat,
This is just to
like,
orient you.
okay,
if I
well,
may,
I
Your Honor.
have some
The
questions
top,
about
this,
the truth. You know, is lawyers,
top
man.
is a dash cam from one cruiser.
So I'm going to see counsel at sidebar for a second, please.
Okay. All right. They're taking a minute. Obviously, it goes mute. It goes mute because we're not allowed to hear. If you have just sort of popped in to see what's going on, this is the Karen Reed trial, Massachusetts versus Karen Reed. Is this a cover-up or is she a murderer? Did she murder her boyfriend in 2022? Police officer, Boston police officer John O'Keefe. The camera is panning to Paul O'Keefe and John's mother and quite possibly some other family members as well. I'm not familiar. I am going into this as basically a juror. I know and knew pretty much the basics of it. I covered it a couple weeks ago. And just the basics. I am going to take in all of the evidence, all the witnesses, and build my decision once deliberation starts along with the jury.
Until we pause it, I'm going to
I
ask you
may or
to
may not come up with the
focus your
same
attention on the top
conclusion.
dash cam video.
But
Go ahead and play that.
yeah. So evidence is evidence. Evidence is evidence, and it was snowing. Look at the snow. How was the wind?
Actually, I need to see counsel at sidebar again, please.
Another sidebar. Another walking about. So we are in witness number 6 for the prosecution's case. This is supposed to be an 8-week trial. We get Monday and Wednesday full days in court, Tuesdays and Thursdays half days until 1 p.m. This is happening in Massachusetts, in Dedham, Massachusetts. This case is very divisive in the community where it is happening. It is very much like Trump Biden energy. You don't bring it up at Thanksgiving because there will be fights. There were consistent protests during the hearings for this case. I'm sure there are people outside the courthouse now voicing their opinions with posters, signs, and shirts as well. Free Karen Reed or lock her up type of energy. Was it a cover up? Was it a murder? As of right now, from the past couple of days, the first 3 days of court, the defense is doing a really, really great job, in my opinion, as a layman and not a lawyer, of really reminding the jury what they said in their opening statements, to continue to ask questions. Do not just accept it because they are people of authority, because they are police officers, because they are EMTs. Do not just accept the paperwork because it's their job to protect and serve. That there will be wrong information, and we very quickly saw the incorrect information with the very first witness, Steven Saroff, who was the first officer on scene. There were notes and markings on different police documents of the address that they were called to and that they drove to and stopped at and helped and spent hour and a half to 2 hours getting everything sprayed.
Folks,
And
we'll
the
take a
address was wrong.
15-minute recess.
Address was wrong. 32, 35, not 34 Fairview. The owner of 34 Fairview at the time was a Boston police officer, I believe, or just a police officer or like a higher ranked police officer as well. Okay, so we are going to scoot and boogie through this brief break because we got to catch up a little behind.
You are muted.
Yes, I'd like to see it.
Okay, so let me just see what we got going on here. Karen is actively listening to someone speak.
You are muted.
Yes, I'd like to see it.
Okay, so what I believe is happening is that the jury has taken a break and the judge is reviewing alongside the lawyers what the footage is going to be. Just to make sure, I guess. Like I said, I'm not a lawyer. This process is not second nature to me, but it is very, very interesting. I'm not a lawyer. I don't want to be a lawyer either. I'm not gonna be a lawyer. But I will continue to watch trials and learn and see what's going on, see what it's all about. So you're seeing here two different videos. The top is Officer Steven Saroff's dash cam. He was the first on scene. And Officer Good's dash cam looks like he is on the way to the scene. And as you can tell, the weather is snowy and windy. Snowy and windy. That is the top footage is new to the courtroom. We haven't seen it yet. That was them continuously supplying CPR to John O'Keefe to get him into the ambulance. Was that Karen? Did she have a blanket? Was that her personal blanket or is that Karen at the top that she brought to the scene or pulled from a car and she's putting it back in her car? Oh, I don't know who that is at the top video. They are cleaning off the windshield.
That's the extent of or approximately the extent of the length of the video, the clip that I was going to play.
Okay. All right. So we'll take a 10-minute recess.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Okay. So everyone else goes on break. That was not shown to the jury. That was just shown to the court. We will push our way through this break to help the catching up. Sorry, that going to the fan is so weird. Like at least go to like a seal or something. But it might be behind the jury, so looks like a murderer to me. Mike.
Why doesn't counsel come
I
to
don't know
Saga
who
the
that
jurors
was.
coming?
I don't know who that was. There were 3 women there, and there have been many remarks that they all sort of looked the same. And for me, I can't tell them apart from that grainy video. And here's my thing. Why on earth is cop dash cam footage, police cruiser dash cam footage so trash? So trash. Do you not want to see what's going on in 4K? Nah. All right, let's get moving. All right, here we go. We're almost caught up. We are in 1.25 speed, but we are almost caught up. Looks like a murderer to me.
Sure.
Over here, this is
Okay.
Paul and Aaron, John's brother and Paul's wife,
Thank you, Your Honor.
John's mother.
Firefighter from Flamati, I want to draw your attention to the top video, and I may pause it and ask you a couple of questions. Let's go ahead. Pause. Did you see a person run into the screen?
Yes.
Run into the frame?
Looking at the top video.
Who's that?
I don't recall.
Okay. Let's go ahead and play it. And pause. I want to draw your attention to the left side of the top video. Did you
Yes.
see somebody wearing a bright yellow jacket?
If you could rewind it, I'd look at that area.
Why don't I play it forward?
Okay.
And see if you see that.
Yes.
Pause. And
Right over
do you
here.
recognize that person?
Oh
I see
my
a yellow-
God.
I can't
Dingus.
tell you who it is.
Okay. Based on your
Can't see, I'm in the
Have you seen
way.
this before, by the way?
No.
Based on your memory.
Right up here.
Is that the approximate position that Mr. O'Keefe was in when you or your colleagues made contact with him?
Approximately, I'd say a little bit more to the left. That would be, I guess.
Okay. You going to play?
Go back to video. Top left of the top, or bottom left of the top video. We're seeing
You see the person
activity.
enter from screen left into the frame.
It looks like a different person, yeah.
That person
Garbage footage.
looks like a-
Garbage.
Yeah.
Does that appear to be my client?
From this angle, I couldn't tell you.
Okay. Go ahead and play it. Pause. You see a person wearing yellow right there on the left side of the screen.
If you're telling me that's a person, sure, yes.
No, he's not telling you. So ask the question. If you don't see it, you don't see it. If you do, you do.
I can't tell what that shape is.
Okay.
Yeah,
Can
it does
you
not look like a
look-
person until they
your eyes
start
focused on that and
moving
tell me if
in
this
a
is
couple seconds.
that figure doing anything?
The footage is absolute
Can you
trash.
recognize that figure now?
I can't recognize the figure, but it looks like an up and down rhythmic motion
Okay.
that would indicate CPR.
Would that be you?
I couldn't tell you. Is the time accurate? There's 6:13.
I'm just asking you what you recognize on the video.
I couldn't tell you if that was myself or not.
Was there somebody else doing CPR?
Multiple people rotate through CPR, so yes.
Who was responsible for doing the chest compressions?
Whoever's closest to that area, we're all trained for that skill.
Okay, I'm asking in this particular case.
Yes.
I know everybody's trained.
Mhm.
Didn't you testify earlier that you were the one doing the chest compressions?
I said I was one of them. Yes.
Okay. Does that appear to be you doing the chest compressions?
It could be. I'm not sure.
Okay, let's go to play.
You can't tell. Come on, don't push it. You know this footage is absolute
So the
garbage.
person basically in the middle of the screen there.
Yes.
Does that appear to be my client? Can you tell?
I can tell.
Go ahead and play it.
Okay, so I do not think Karen had a hood on. She had her hair out.
Pause it.
All right, so they come in with the
Individual
stretcher.
From screen right.
Yes.
That you can
Does
see.
that appear to be in the yellow jacket?
That build would have been probably, it could have been firefighter Kelly or it could have been McLaughlin.
Who's the person trailing the gurney?
Don't guess, just say it looks like a woman. So
I can't tell.
Okay, that's right.
it's also the most
Pause it.
terrible time of
And
pausing.
the hood just obscured that figure. Did you see that?
The
figure
judge
standing
is
on the other
getting a
side?
little
No.
angsty. I can hear it in her breathing.
Pause it. The activity that's going on just to the sort of left side of the SUV in the frame. Can you describe for the jurors what that activity is?
So that would be lowering the stretcher to get ready to load the patient on.
I think it would have been better to play the whole thing and then ask questions.
Now, this person now appears to be facing the camera. Do you now recognize that person?
I don't.
Go ahead.
No. You can't see. You can't see a face. You can't make out a face and make a definitive
Can you focus your attention on that
identification.
individual in the yellow jacket?
Especially as someone who wasn't
What does that
like
person seem to be doing?
part of the investigation. They were just there trying to save a life.
Chest compressions.
I don't see like I see how going
I
a
wanna make
little
sure that
hard
Betsy
on
can
them
break down what we're both saying. So which part of the CPR?
Chest compressions.
Thank you. Is that
can be helpful,
I
but
don't know.
okay? At this point, you have no idea whether or not you don't remember whether you were the one doing chest compressions when he was moved from the ground to the gurney.
I don't recall.
But you did earlier testify you were doing chest compressions.
I did at some point during this call, yes.
Okay. In the entire length of this video,
Mhm.
did you see anybody else trade off from that person doing chest compressions from the time the person was on the ground to the gurney? Or is that the same person?
It could be the same person. I'm not sure.
could be the same person. Were there
Sustained.
Okay, go ahead.
Jurors disregard that.
Oh, sorry, I was talking. Let me see.
Would you say that's probably you?
Objection, Your Honor.
Sustained.
Okay, go ahead.
Jurors disregard that.
Disregard the. Could you say that's probably you? He said he doesn't remember if he was wearing his yellow jacket or not. He doesn't remember if he was the one.
Pause it. I want to direct your attention to this person. It appears to be a firefighter in the middle.
So there's two people.
Yes.
Objection, may we?
The objection sustained. I'll see counsel at sidebar.
Oh my gosh. She is not happy with the defense. She is not happy. She is not happy. And if I was sitting in that jury box, like next to all the other jurors, I'd be like, ooh, this is so uncomfortable. I fear, oh my gosh, I feel like the defense has a job. They have a job to do: poke holes, develop doubt, create doubt, create as much doubt as possible, right? Because if beyond a reasonable doubt, guilty, like you have to develop the doubt as the defense team. But I feel like making the jury feel the discomfort and like really like expanding on the discomfort to force the doubt is not always the best tactic, especially what I would assume to be a community that loves and respects the police, and EMTs and firefighters
Yes.
and everything like that. I would say going in nice and like doing like a nice reveal of the doubt would probably be best.
Fire jacket
It just
and build, I
feels
would
like
guess it was
it's
either
being
firefighter
so
Kelly or-
forced.
So we don't want you to guess.
I would, my
uncomfortable.
best
Yeah,
estimation
stop
would be
guessing.
firefighter McLaughlin.
Firefighter McLaughlin.
Yes.
Okay.
Don't guess. If you don't know, say I don't know.
Pause.
Oh my god,
Recognize the
the
person
pausing. The
in the
pausing
yellow
is
jacket
so.
to the right of the
Footage is
described
absolute
as
garbage.
Firefighter McLaughlin.
No.
What is that person doing apparently?
My guess would be, I'm sorry, guess,
Not even an estimate. Do you know?
I don't.
Next question.
Just don't know. I don't know.
Pause. At that
The
point,
judge feels like the tone from the
your
judge
colleagues
feels
in
like
placing
she's
Mr.
mad that the defense is even
Based on that,
cross-examining them,
that could be you following Gurney in the yellow jacket.
even though they have full right to.
And who is the lead?
When the prosecution just
firefighter? When I
spent
say lead, I
hours
mean the one to the right, leading the gurney on the front side of the gurney.
describing the
I'm
weather
not sure.
Okay. One of your colleagues, though.
and
What did
how
you
much
do
light there
once you
was.
left the frame? Where did you go?
That would have been into the ambulance.
And as you earlier indicated, shut the doors, correct?
Correct.
Okay. And you never came back.
Speak into the mic.
Okay. I'd like to draw your attention to the lower video,
Okay.
and we're just going to let that play for a couple of minutes and see if you recognize anything. I'll ask you to pause in just a second.
Okay, so we're at the lower video now. I'll take myself off. And it's clearly dash cam footage of an officer on the way to the scene.
I'm going to ask you to look up to the top video. You see what appears to be a person wearing yellow to the right?
I thought we were on the lower
That's
video.
what it is.
No.
I can't focus on two separate videos. You can see him approaching the other vehicles with their lights on as well. Tight squeeze, tight squeeze.
The lower video,
Damn.
you see what appears to be a vehicle in the middle of the screen?
Yes.
What is that?
As an ambulance.
Does that appear to be the ambulance that you arrived in?
Yes.
And that's the ambulance that you took Mr. O'Keefe to?
Yes.
Doors are closed?
I think
Are you in the
only
ambulance?
one ambulance arrived to the scene.
I'm not
So.
sure.
Well, if this was, let me just ask it a different way. If this was running continuously.
Yeah.
No pauses. You've already taken Mr. O'Keefe to the ambulance. Would you have gotten in the ambulance?
I don't recall.
Well, I mean, you're not standing outside the ambulance.
So if you know the answer.
I don't know.
Next question.
You have no idea whether you're in the ambulance or not at this point.
At this point, no.
Would you have gone anyplace else when you left the frame?
Could have been to gather equipment, but for certain, I don't know.
That is fair.
Mr. O'Keefe had been.
If there's a bag still on the ground,
Been in the ambulance. Again, don't know for certain.
Could have been or was in the
stop
ambulance.
guessing.
At this
Just
time,
say
I don't
you
know.
don't know.
Okay. So,
It's fine if you don't know. Like I don't see there being a problem if you don't
see
know.
The group of people, including the individual with the yellow jacket
Judge.
on the screen,
Yes.
that appear to be the same from a different angle, same group of people, including the person with the yellow jacket on the top screen.
Yes.
Who was the person that was directed to get the medical history from my client?
McLaughlin.
You believe that's Ms. McLaughlin?
No.
You don't think that's her?
I'd have to rewind to know where she went.
Well, let me ask you a couple of other questions. In the bottom screen, you see a police officer?
Yes.
You see a woman with long hair standing next to the police officer? That appeared to be my client.
Yes.
An individual with a fire jacket on, right?
Yes.
And Ms. McLaughlin was directed to get medical history and interview my client, correct?
Yes.
Does that appear to be what she's doing right there?
Objection, Your Honor.
Sustained.
It's a still of activity. He can't.
Where do you believe you were now?
I'm uncomfortable.
Think you might have been in the ambulance?
I don't remember.
You testified
you-
earlier, and this has been a continuously running video on the top. You
Yeah.
testified earlier that when you left the screen with that gurney, you got in the ambulance, correct?
We headed that way, yes.
So firefighter Flamati, it's not a trick question. Where did you go when you left the screen?
It would have been to either gather equipment or to put the patient in the ambulance.
Okay, what equipment did you need to gather?
It would have been anything that was left by the patient's side, whether it was a first in bag, airway bag, any other equipment,
Oops, sorry. I did not mean to hit pause.
basically.
You were doing chest compressions.
I didn't state that.
You didn't say that?
I said I did chest compressions at some point. I didn't say I did them continuously throughout the call.
So you just put John O'Keefe in the back of the ambulance and went to look for some equipment?
Not what I said. So chest compressions were done continually throughout, whether they were done by me or by another provider. I can't tell you specifically.
So when you left the screen and John O'Keefe is on the gurney, you're engaged in vital, life-saving, a vital life-saving endeavor, correct?
Yes.
That had to have been your focus, correct?
That was at the time. Yes.
And you wanted to get him out of the cold, the weather.
Yes.
Because it was inclement, it was freezing out, correct?
Yes.
So you wanted to
I
put him
think
in
it
the
was
ambulance,
a like
right?
condition.
And you wanted to continue CPR because in your words, you testified on direct examination, you believe that there might be some viability left.
Yes.
So CPR and life-saving measures were absolutely vital at that point.
Yes.
You didn't go find equipment, you got in the ambulance, didn't you?
Yes.
So at this point, you're in the ambulance, correct?
At this point, I don't know.
You indicated
Oh.
you never got back out of the ambulance after you got in, correct?
You never left the ambulance.
I don't believe so, no.
Did you see any place in that video where you had any sort of detailed conversation with my client?
No.
Did you see any place in that video where you engaged my client and said, how'd you get here? What happened? And she said, I hit him. And you said, how'd you hit him? All the stuff that you testified earlier to.
I didn't see that in the video, no.
Yeah, but that was probably earlier. I don't think you showed
In a police
that
report.
part of the video.
During an interview that you had with
You didn't show the video of the ambulance arriving, right? Am I missing something?
Yuri
And
Pupnik
getting out and
on February 8th.
show me the video of the ambulance arriving.
That my client said, I hit him, correct?
Correct.
You remember having that conversation with Sergeant Pupnik?
I don't recall the conversation, but I'm trusting that your records
A
are-
lot of people don't recall the
Is it true
conversation with
that
that
during that
sergeant, that
conversation,
where he was,
You indicated to
where they said that
Sergeant
all the
Pupnik
things
that
Karen said. A lot of people are not
Katie
recalling.
spoke with Karen Reed. Katie who?
McLaughlin.
Katie spoke with Karen Reed, collecting medical history for the victim, and was also told by Karen that the last time she saw the victim was at 1 a.m. that morning. That is when Anthony, who's Anthony,
Would have been myself.
that is when Anthony heard Karen say, I hit him, I hit him. Is that what you told Sergeant Pupnik?
I don't recall.
Does it appear that this is the time, firefighter Flamati, that Katie McLaughlin is getting a medical history from my client, or attempting to?
It does feel
I
messy.
can't tell from the video.
You do know, however,
This defense
that
system,
during this time,
it's feeling
you're in an
messy
ambulance
in like
probably
a,
30 or 40 feet away.
not like the unorganized way. They're organized, but it's like,
I don't know.
You certainly don't see yourself in that frame, do you?
you
Doesn't
know,
appear to be, no.
you know when you eat a banana and you have like that after like coating of banana in your mouth? That's like what I'm getting.
If we're done with the videos, can we take it down,
Of
please?
course, yes.
Like it was good, like it was really good, but like now it's kind of, I need a drink. You know, like I need to
You were the
need to
lead
clean off my mouth.
firefighter on
feeling.
that team.
It's
at that
weird.
point, correct?
Lead
This is
paramedic.
very
Lead-
uncomfortable.
I'm sorry, lead paramedic, thank you. You understood, obviously, the gravity of hearing a statement like, I hit him, some sort of an explanation about what may have happened to the victim, correct?
Correct.
That statement could potentially have direct relationship to, or a direct relation.
This is day 3. I don't have any notes in my notebook so far of a video showing the ambulance arriving on scene and like the EMTs getting out. So, and if I remember, like this is only day 3, like the memory of all of the evidence is fresh. And I think it would be fresh for the jury. And so for the defense to not give us that and then give us that such harsh questioning, like the vibe was harsh questioning for the EMT about like the conversation he had with Karen. I'm pretty sure the jury is going to have like the same feeling, like, okay, but like there's video of everything else, but there's no video of this. Like, where's the video? Like, show me the video.
Relational impact on how life-saving measures are done by the medical personnel that you turn the victim over to.
Correct.
You testified at the grand jury that you wanted, once you got to the hospital, you wanted to be as quote unquote helpful as possible. And you handed over the patient, correct?
Correct.
You said you actually stayed at Good Samaritan for an additional 10 to 20 minutes, which is your habit in cases like this, because you wanted to be quote unquote an asset to the medical intervention team, correct? Correct.
Which I think is fair and respectable.
That team includes the doctors and nurses that were trying to provide life-saving services to Mr.
Correct.
But you never relayed to a single doctor or a single nurse a single
He's
word
mad.
about a woman who said,
He does not want to be there.
Documentation for us ends at transfer of patient care. As far as my memory, I do remember relaying that information to the doctors and nurses.
You do.
Yes.
Okay, but
You ever
why was
testified
it?
about that ever previous to
Never,
this?
never been asked about that.
Oh, nobody ever asked you, so you didn't tell anybody.
In the court setting? No.
Testified in front of a grand jury, didn't you?
Yes.
Mr. Lally asked you a bunch of questions. During the course of that conversation that was under oath, did you ever disclose that you told the doctors and the nurses that you heard a woman say, "I hit him"?
Why not tell the
recall
police on
telling the
scene?
Doctors and nurses that there is a question of that the patient was hit by a vehicle or we don't know, is what I directly said to the doctors and nurses.
You directly told the doctors and nurses that there was a question about whether or not he was hit by a vehicle, right?
Yes.
Have you ever said that in any context, either to the police or in a grand jury before today?
I don't recall.
You were asked a bunch of questions
That's gonna be a
yesterday,
no.
the day before yesterday and this morning by Mr. Lally.
Yes.
Did you say it on your direct examination?
I wasn't asked that question.
So
Oh
since
my
Mr.
God.
Lally didn't ask you, you just left it out, that you told the doctors, the medical professionals, that in fact, you described that this patient was likely hit by a car.
Man on ground, non-responsive, unconscious, half frozen to death. And someone comes over to the EMT working on him and says, I hit him, I hit him, I hit him, I hit him. And there's cops on scene. Why are you not directly going, she hit him? Or come on, police officers, she hit him. I can't right now. But I told the doctors and nurses. Okay, well, there's so many levels of legal investigation in this case right now. Like, it's so many levels, like the grand jury, the federal investigation. This is none of those. This is a state level trial, and he has testified multiple times to multiple different levels of like legality. I don't know, like courts and stuff. What are you saying? You're telling me that while you were on the scene and you heard a woman who was the most distressed say, I hit him, I hit him, I hit him, and there was police officers on the scene and she was yelling. She was 2 feet away from me, but she was yelling. And you didn't tell the cops? There was multiple times to have a conversation as he's getting in the ambulance, as he's a police officer helped you get him on the board, to get him on the stretcher. And there was no, oh, by the way, she said she hit him. There was no moment for that. No moment for that. Popping in to give some new pencils and pens to you reporters. Keep crushing it. Thanks, David. We're having a moment. We're having a real moment about all of the nonsense that is happening right now. And this dead face that he has right now, he's realizing like, uh-oh. that's a real uh-oh.
Sustained.
Let's just go back just a little bit.
The medical professionals, that in fact, you described that this patient was likely hit by a car.
Objection, Your Honor.
Sustained.
You wrote a report.
I don't think that should have been sustained.
Correct?
Yes.
We talked a little bit about that report.
But I'm also not a lawyer,
In the
so.
report for a narrative.
Yes.
About your observations, your experiences with this patient, correct?
Correct.
Your job as a lead paramedic is to be as detailed as possible, correct?
Right.
You
So
wanna
where
provide
is
and
the
impart
detail of
the
I
most
hit him, I
detail you
hit him, I
possibly
hit
can
him?
about an incident to assist in medical intervention, correct?
And
Take a look at page
that's the only ones that heard her say it.
3 of 5.
The
of your
police
report.
heard her
You
say
see that narrative
a whole
area?
different other thing.
Can you point to that portion of your report where you indicate that my client said the words, "I hit him"?
It doesn't say that.
Can you point to your report, the portion of your report where you indicate that you told the doctors and nurses that she said, "I hit him"?
It doesn't say that.
Can you point to that portion of your report where you indicate that your concern for the patient was that he had been hit by a car?
It doesn't say that.
Where in the report did you put that she said she hit him, or that you believe that he might have been hit by a car?
You indicated on direct examination that you were, quote unquote, looking for anything that we could pass on to the emergency room that would assist.
Right.
I think it might have been an assistance to the emergency room personnel to indicate that you believe this person had been hit by a car.
Objection.
Sustained.
Do you believe that that would have been an important piece of information
Wait.
to pass on to the emergency room?
Why?
assistants?
Objection.
I'll let him have that.
It would have been important, yes.
And it's nowhere in your reports, correct?
It's not in the reports, no.
You didn't tell that to the police when you were interviewed 8 days later.
I was not asked about how or what I was.
My question is, did you tell the police 8 days later, or 9 days later when you were interviewed?
Yes or no?
And you didn't tell the grand jury that, correct?
No.
And you didn't mention that on direct examination in front of these jurors. did you?
No. No, you did
Have
not.
a moment, Your Honor.
Yes.
I don't like in this court, it's probably a judge ruling or just how they do it. They just say objection. They don't say like the reason, like which objection, like objection asked and answered, objection hearsay, that type of objection. So it's crazy to me. It's not like, oh my God, crazy, but it's different than what I'm used to watching.
External observation.
Redirect.
Internal injury cause, is that correct?
Correct.
Now, the conversation that you were talking about, in which the defendant indicated to you repeatedly that she hit him or I hit him, that occurred on your sort of way to the body, correct?
Correct.
Now, turning back to sort of when you're coming to the scene and arriving at the scene, you've got a call or dispatch in regard to an unresponsive male in the snow, correct?
Correct.
You know that going there, correct?
Correct.
And where you sort of bring the ambulance to a stop, there are other vehicles already in that area where Mr. O'Keefe is, correct?
Correct.
And it's from that vantage point that you're able to then see Mr. O'Keefe's body off the side of the road about 10 feet or so into the wall.
Correct.
Right, because there's already
Now, when it comes to
multiple lights
chest
pointing at him.
Your department, any department, as far as sort of the medical field that you're in, is there any sort of policy or protocol for how long one person should be doing those at a time?
So recommendation is always 2 minutes, but it's usually based on the fatigue of the provider.
2
But
minutes
really
is
the
a
most
long
important thing
time.
is just quality of CPR and
Doing chest
making sure that they have the best CPR throughout, regardless of fatigue.
High
It's not
quality
recommended that one person
CPR.
do continuous chest compressions for 15 or 20 minutes, correct?
It's actually recommended not.
Right, because you
And
will
so
be
that would sort
exhausted.
of- when you have that many sort of assets with you on scene, would it be typical for somebody to continue on with chest compressions for that long period of time?
Swap out, swap out.
Those videos that you were showing up on the screen, have you ever seen either of those videos?
No.
So you have no idea as far as the times, whether they're accurate, correct?
No clue.
And whether the videos are synchronous, you have no idea about that either, correct?
No.
Now, the conversation in which you heard the defendant say, "I hit him," and the conversation that firefighter McLaughlin had in which the defendant told her, "I hit him," those are two separate conversations, correct?
Correct.
Happened at two different times, two different locations, and you weren't even present for Ms. McLaughlin's statement, correct?
Correct.
What you did when you were interviewed by the trooper and when you testified before the grand jury, you indicated in both instances that the defendant said to you, "I hit him," repeatedly, correct?
Correct.
Now, when you were asked questions about what you relayed to the hospital staff, that what you're testifying to, that's your memory of what you told the hospital, correct?
Correct.
And you indicated in that you had said something to the effect of, there's a question about whether or not Mr. O'Keefe had been hit by a car, correct?
Correct.
And so from your conversations with the defendants and the sort of expounding questions that you would ask for clarification, why was it that you related motor vehicle sort of specifically as a question to the hospital staff?
So it was due to the proximity of the patient to the roadway and the vagueness of the statement. So proximity to the roadway and the fact that she stated, I hit him, the red flag of him being underdressed and not. People don't just lie down in the snow in a blizzard. So
It was a
how he
blizzard.
got there, we're not sure. So we're trying to figure out what happened, but due to the proximity of the roadway, that was our first inclination.
I have nothing.
And not the proximity to the
All right,
home.
you,
May I, Your Honor?
a couple of questions.
Oh, this did not end well last time for a recross. A recross did not end well last
You understand
time.
that it's not recommended that someone do chest compressions for 15 or 20 minutes.
Correct.
You saw the video. It was on screen. That video was about 3 minutes.
Yes.
Did it appear that the same person that was doing chest compressions at the beginning of the video continued doing chest compressions all the way through?
I don't know.
We just watched the video.
I can't tell you for certain which personnel. We all have yellow coats, so I can't tell you if somebody swapped. I don't know.
So
It
you
appeared
were,
to
you remember you were
watching that
wearing a
video
yellow coat?
That the person that started on
That's just not
chest
happy.
compressions on the left side of the screen continued all the way through, up to the scoop, up to the gurney, and off screen doing chest compressions.
Objection.
Sustained.
I'm having frustrations. But even
You
though
indicated that when you heard this phrase, I hit him,
the
your
bias is
response
feeling a
was,
little
you hit
weighted
him with your hand,
by the judge
right?
right now,
did you kick him?
I
Yes.
think they're still
Punch him?
getting their
Previously
point across.
testified to, correct?
Yes.
Nowhere in that conversation, did you ever suggest, did you hit him with your car?
I don't recall if I asked her specifically about that.
So now you don't recall about that either.
Objection, Your Honor.
Sustained.
And for the first time in any forum,
Question, it was a comment, and
you're telling this jury
go easy on those.
that you then thought, based on that conversation that was attendant to the video that we just watched,
Mhm.
you believed that Mr. O'Keefe had been hit by a car and that she said she did it.
I did not say that. So what, am I allowed to respond?
Yes.
So I left it open-ended to the staff of the hospital that these are both possibilities of what happened to the patient.
And of course,
But
if you had
not
said that
to
staff of the hospital,
the
staff of the
police.
hospital would certainly put it in some of the medical reports, correct?
They don't have to. It's really up to them.
And you're aware that none of those have that statement.
I'm not aware.
No medical report
Was
has
that-
the statement.
All right,
that-
you are all set, firefighter Flamati, or paramedic Flamati. Thank you. Who is your next witness, Mr. Lally?
Yes, Your Honor. The Commonwealth will call Mr. Matthew Kelly.
Okay.
May I approach just to retrieve the exhibit?
Sure.
I think it's right there.
Oh, very interesting morning in court today. Very, very interesting. All right, next witness.
You solemnly swear to the court and jury in the case I'm hearing to the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God.
I do.
Morning. So you consider stand however you're comfortable. Just bring, perfect. Thank you.
He's like, I got it. I know what I'm doing.
All right,
doing.
Mr. Lally, whenever you're ready.
Thank you, Your
Okay, here we go.
Honor. Good morning, sir.
Good morning.
Could you please state your name and spell your last name for the record?
Sure. Matthew Kelly, Kelly.
And what is it that you do for work, sir?
I'm a firefighter paramedic for Canton Fire.
And
Do you
how
say
long have you been
EY
a
or
firefighter
L
paramedic
or
for
just
Canton?
Y?
Approximately 2 for Canton Fire. LY.
Oh, Y.
And what is it that you're a firefighter paramedic with Canton Fire?
Approximately 2.5 years.
And prior to working for the Canton Fire Department, what, if any, other employment did you have within that sort of field?
I worked for a private ambulance, Brewster Ambulance Service for approximately 5 months.
And sort of geographically, where was that located?
Boston area.
Now, prior to you working as an EMT or paramedic, you worked as an EMT before working as a paramedic?
Correct.
And so prior to working as either an EMT or paramedic, did you have any sort of training or did you receive any sort of certification in regards to being an EMT paramedic?
Yeah, so I had to do a 6-month EMT course, and then I had to do a practical and written exam for the course and then for the state to get my EMT. And then for a paramedic school, it was about a 10 to 12-month didactic portion. And then I did I believe it was 200 hours clinical in the hospitals. And then I did 300 hours ride time. And then I had to do a practical and written exam for the course and also for the state. And now with Canton Fire, I'm getting precepted as a paramedic.
Yep.
And
All the
so
steps
when
that
you use that
all
term,
the other
what exactly does that
emergency personnel went through.
It just means that you get trained by an experienced paramedic for an extended period of time until they say that you can do the job on your own.
And with regard to being a EMT and a paramedic, you receive certification in regard to working within that field?
Can you say that again?
With regard to being an EMT
Speak
and
up.
paramedic, you receive some sort of certification, either from the state or some other body in regard to working in that field.
Yes.
Do you have certification in regard to both?
Yes.
Poor Matthew Kelly. He was the newbie on the scene, so he must have been there for just like very fresh. So he was the one holding the bag
Yes, I was.
for ventilation because he was new on the scene. And,
24-hour shift on the ambulance.
that's why
And
what's his
station
name?
house were you assigned to on that?
Timothy
Station one.
Nuttall even hopped on
Located,
the
where was
ambulance
the content?
99 Revere Street.
because he was so new and he figured a helping hand
If
would
anyone
be
else in
good.
your department was assigned to the ambulance along with you.
Paramedic Anthony Fumati.
And on that morning of January 29th, do you recall about what time that you woke up on that day?
I believe it was about 4:45 a.m.
Whew,
When
could
you
you
woke up, what, if
imagine?
anything, is it that you did with regard to your duties and responsibilities around fire
Um,
station control?
So we woke up a little bit early to shovel off the apron, shovel off the parking lot, and just prepare for the new shift coming in.
And just briefly, sir, like, so when you go outside to shovel, what, if anything, do you recall about sort of the weather conditions and what they were?
Yeah, was it snowing by any chance?
There was snow on the ground. It was snowing, high winds, low visibility, still dark out.
Describe the gusts.
And do you recall being dispatched to a
Continuous
call shortly after 6
gusts.
a.m.?
Yes, I do.
And what was that call, or what was that dispatch in regard to, and where specifically were you dispatched?
It was unresponsive male in the snow on Fairview Road.
And that area of Fairview Road, through your work with the Canton Fire Department, are you familiar with that specific area?
Yes,
It
And
was fairly close. It was like a mile and a half
you
away.
respond in the ambulance, is that correct?
correct.
Who, if anyone, goes along in the ambulance with you?
Fumati was in the passenger seat, and then paramedic Tim Nuttall was in the back.
And who was driving?
I was driving.
And
Tim
in
Nuttall
addition
hopped in the
to
back 'cause there's
ambulance,
only driver and
ambulance
passenger.
what, if any, other sort of vehicles or apparatus responded from your station to Fairview Road?
We also had an engine and our shift commander SUV.
If you recall, who was the shift commander in the SUV?
Shift commander was Captain Wendell Robbery at the time.
And Captain Robery is now the chief of Canton Fire, is that correct?
Correct.
And
Got
as far as
promoted.
the engine was concerned, who, if anyone, was assigned to the engine and responded to the calls from?
It was
Were
Lieutenant
promoted? I don't know.
Greg Woodbury,
I don't know the.
firefighter, paramedic Katie McLaughlin, and firefighter, paramedic Frank Walsh.
And as you're driving from the station house to Fairview, what, if anything, do you recall about weather conditions, visibility, anything like that along the way?
Just heavy snow and wind, real low visibility, good amount of snow on the ground. So I was just trying to take it slow so we didn't spin out or drift or anything like that.
Yeah.
And can you
The last
describe
thing you
your
need is
sort
the
of route
ambulance on the way
from
to
the
a
station on Revere
scene
Street
like that to crash.
Yep, we took a right onto Revere Street, left onto Sherman Street, right onto Chapman Street, and then a left onto Fairview.
I'm gonna have to Google
As you're
map
driving
this
down Fairview,
because
what, if
I
anything,
don't.
can you tell the jury about sort of the elevation of that roadway?
It's starting to
Driving
create a
down.
vision in my head of the local
It was a pretty
layout, but
pretty steep, long road
jury, they get it.
downhill. It was probably the downhill for half of the way through Fairview. And because of that, I was just trying to go real slow, so we didn't drift down the hill.
And one last question about driving, but as you're driving along, what, if anything else, did you observe as far as sort of other vehicular traffic on the roadway, any other cars, trucks, anything like that?
Nothing until I saw the police cruiser at the scene.
Wow,
And so
not a
as you're
single
approaching the scene and you're
car.
driving towards it, what, if anything, sort of first draws your attention?
Roads
to
must have been
where
really
you're
terrible. It was
going and
also
where you're
really
stopping?
early in the morning.
So it was just real low visibility, but we could see blue lights at the time. So just kept going towards the blue lights and knew that it would be in that area.
Now, where do you stop in relation to the cruiser?
I believe they were facing towards us, so we would be in front of them.
And at some point, you're being dispatched for an unresponsive male part, correct?
Nervous.
And so when you're pulling up,
Okay,
to
don't
the
be
scene of the
nervous.
cruiser, are you able to also
A lot of people are going in that
male
seat,
part?
you know.
Not when I'm in the truck. I had to get out of the truck to see.
And when was it, and how far away from it were you at the first time that you observed the unresponsive male?
Once I got out of the truck, I was probably had to be about like 5 feet away until I could see.
Ew. Interesting.
And at this
So we had
time
to be
when you're
kind of
arriving sometime
close.
shortly after 6 a.m. Is it light out, dark out, or something?
It's dark.
And
Right. Had the sun come up yet?
Saying unresponsive male. At some point, you identified who the patient was that you eventually treated.
We know
Very important.
the sun has not come
Who
up
did you
yet.
identify him?
Mr. O'Keefe.
John O'Keefe, is that correct?
Correct.
So you get out of the vehicle. You all get out at the same time, is that correct?
Relatively, yeah.
And where is it that you, firefighter Kamadi and firefighter Nuttall, go?
Nuttall had to grab the bag, so it might have taken.
So we
an
first go to
extra second.
pick up some of the bags and stuff that we would need to conduct a arrest, and then we just go straight over to the body and some people that were around there.
And with regard to the bags that you retrieved, what kind of bags are we talking?
We take like a first-in bag that has miscellaneous stuff. We take an airway bag, and we would take a cardiac monitor.
And when you indicate, as far as where Mr. O'Keefe was, who, if anyone else, or what, if any other people were in that same area?
Can you say that one more time?
When you first go over to where Mr. O'Keefe
Speak
was,
up.
who, if anyone, or how many other people are in that general area?
Sure. I remember seeing a police officer and 2 women.
And
He only saw 2 women.
as far as where Mr.
When
O'Keefe was,
the cops
or how
got there
his
before the
position
ambulance, there was 3.
He was on his back, probably about around a fire hydrant, probably about 5 or so feet from what I saw would be the street.
So you believe about 5 or so feet in from the road, correct?
Correct.
Now, with
The
regard
estimation
to,
between him and the
Mr.
street
O'Keefe when you
is
first come over, what, if anything,
wonky
did you
because
observe
of the
as far
snow
as,
and plowing.
Snow on him or around him or in the area where
I don't really recall.
you recall how Mr. O'Keefe was dressed when you first get over there?
I believe he was wearing a hoodie, like a sweatshirt and jeans, and remember he had 1 shoe on, but forget which.
He remembers
You don't recall
he
which one
only
was,
had
but
1
it was
shoe
only
on.
one split at that point.
Correct.
I want to know where that 3rd woman went too. Yeah, I'm pretty sure Jennifer went to the
When you
house.
first arrive at this patient, at Mr. O'Keefe, what is it that you and the other firefighters
Hoodie,
were doing in regard
jeans,
to treatment at that?
1 shoe.
So the other
Now,
firefighters
I
were
wonder if
checking
he
for a
actually
pulse.
remembers him only having 1
and
shoe,
then
or
after
has
that,
just
we-
been
while I
had
was
the
getting some of the supplies,
conversations
and then we
of
would
he only had 1 shoe, and
start
so now he knows
compressions
he only
and
had 1 shoe.
start moving them into the ambulance. so
Your
we could
memory can
get a better look at
change
him
with the
and,
more information
what
that
we're
you
doing.
know.
When you say start compressions, what kind of compressions are you referring to?
Chest
CPR.
compressions.
Chest compressions,
Yes.
correct. And based on your training experience, is there some sort of protocol as to how long one individual should be doing chest compressions?
Oh, now you asked the question.
So we want early and
I asked it
continuous
last
chest
time.
compressions for as long as the person is pulseless. We will take breaks in order to check for a pulse and check for any rhythm changes.
I don't. But why did you ask
So
this
when
question in
breaks are taken, is
prosecution?
that one person that's doing those same compressions the entire time, or is it
Here we
switched
go.
off or something?
We try to switch off every few minutes.
Okay. Good follow-up
Now,
question
when
there,
you
because it
first
would not have
approached,
looked
where
good
Mr.
if he didn't
O'Keefe
follow
was
that up.
on the ground, what, if any, sort of injuries, if at all, did you observe on Mr. O'Keefe at that time?
On the ground, I didn't observe any injuries or recall seeing any injuries at the time. It wasn't until I got him in the ambulance that I saw some injuries.
And so from that sort of initial assessment and initial sort of treatment of the patient, what exactly does that sort of assessment and treatment consist of when Mr. O'Keefe is on the ground?
Basically, just checking for breathing and if he has a pulse. It was pretty dark and very low visibility, so we wanted to get him out of the conditions and into the ambulance to kind of further assess him.
Right, and remember, Matthew
From
Kelly
sort of
was the
initial
newbie,
assessment,
so
did
he
have a
was
follow-up agreed?
No.
really just like hands-on, getting
So
him
get him out of the conditions,
ventilated,
how
getting
was
air
that?
into his lungs.
I believe we used a
Forcing,
scoop board or a
helping,
scoop stretcher, just a backboard that
Nuttall
breaks
at
into
the
2
head.
pieces. They can slide underneath the victim or the patient. We used that, and then we
Scoop.
had picked him up and put him onto our actual EMS stretcher, and then just put the stretcher into the ambulance.
And where was the stretcher sort of placed in regard to where, or in relation to where Mr. O'Keefe was 5 feet off the road?
I don't recall.
Now, once you get,
I
to the
wasn't.
ambulance, what, if
I
any,
don't feel like that
differences
was a
you
good
noticed
question
between sort of
for
lighting in
him.
the ambulance versus the lighting outside on the lawn?
So there was very low visibility outside. There was great
Tell me
visibility inside.
How dark it was before the
lighting all
sun
around the
came
back
up
of the
in the
ambulance.
middle of blizzard-like
So once
conditions.
you're in the
Was
back
it
of the
dark?
ambulance, what, if anything, did you observe or note at that point in regard to any injuries you observed in Mr. O'Keefe?
He had like a swollen black and blue right eye, and he had some blood around his mouth.
Black and blue, right
As far as
eye,
Mr. O'Keefe was
swollen,
concerned, during treatment,
blood
you
around
obviously
mouth.
touching or making contact with Mr. O'Keefe's body, correct?
Correct.
And during the course of that, what, if any, observations or what, if anything, did you note in regard to sort of tactile observations of Mr. O'Keefe?
He was very cold to touch, very stiff, almost frozen-like. Yeah.
Now, at some point during the course of your treatment in the back of the ambulance, are his clothes removed?
Yes.
Is that Why?
Yeah. Wet clothes, get him off,
It's
get him
just so
warm.
we can try to examine his full body for any other injuries.
And there's some concern for cardiac arrest, correct?
Correct.
Can you explain, are you familiar with that term?
Yes.
Can you explain to the jury what your understanding based on your training experience is as what is cardiac arrest?
Sure. It would be when a person has a lethal cardiac rhythm where they no longer have a pulse.
Now, once
Heart don't work.
the clothes, as far as being removed, how are they physically? Sort of how are they?
I believe they were probably cut off with trauma shears.
And once the clothes are removed with trauma shears, what if any additional observations you can make of injuries to Mr. O'Keefe's body?
There were some lacerations on his right upper extremity.
The furrows that Nuttall was talking about.
Now, the chest compressions that you were talking about, was that
His mouth is
continuous
dry.
throughout the patient care with respect to Mr. O'Keefe?
Yes.
And
He looks so
in addition
scared
to that, what if anything was done with respect
and
to
like
body
sad.
for Mr. O'Keefe once in the bathroom?
So we did some rewarming. So we did heat blankets and warm fluids.
And as the chest compressions continue in the back of the ambulance, what if anything did you observe with regard to Mr. O'Keefe's nose or mouth?
I remember that there was some blood or vomit or bile coming out of his mouth.
And he was there as it was being suctioned. Remember, there was the blood, bile,
Your
and
attention
mucus
to
being
back
pulled
outside
out.
of the ambulance, taking you back
It was
there.
blocking his airway.
You indicated in
Nuttall made a
when you
note
arrived
that there was a
were
lot
females in the area
of
where
gunk in
was,
there.
is that correct? Can you
But
describe
we
anything
don't know
about
how
what they looked
or
like
why.
Anything about those two females that you saw?
I just remember they were white, looked to be between 35 and 45 years old, I would say, and average build and height.
If someone said I look between
What, if
35
any,
and
sort of,
45, I'd
distinguishing
cry if I wasn't
characteristics,
between 35 and
you observed
45.
between one of the
I remember one had some red stuff around her mouth. I was thinking it could be blood.
Karen.
And that individual that you observed with red stuff that you thought could be blood around her mouth, what, if any, observations did you make of her as far as her demeanor or anything like that?
She was just acting kind of erratic and
Frantic.
kind of running around screaming different things.
And as far
What
as
was
the
she
different things that
screaming?
She was screaming. What, if anything, do you recall specifically hearing her screaming when she was running around?
It was just something like, "He's dead. He's fucking dead."
Oh! He didn't want to curse in court, but it's okay.
She said once or more than once or something.
At least twice.
As far
He's
as that
dead,
sort of
he's fucking
phraseology,
dead.
is that consistent throughout?
I would say so, yes.
She didn't say, I hit him, I hit him, I hit him, I hit him, 2 feet away from you, screaming
Now,
in your face.
When you enter the ambulance, does the patient care continue, obviously, with Mr. O'Keefe?
Yes.
And if you recall, who was sort of involved in that patient care in the back of the ambulance?
Me, Nuttall, Flamati, Woodbury, Walsh, and McLaughlin came in a little bit later. I'm not sure if she did any patient care or not.
The majority of the people from your department that responded to the scene at one point or another were involved in patient care with regard to Mr. O'Keefe.
Correct.
Yeah, they weren't just
Now,
not doing
you drove the
anything.
ambulance to Fairview, is that correct?
Correct.
And so
Like
for the transport from
Stephen Sorrow.
Fairview, what hospital did you go to?
Good Samaritan,
So the transport from Fairview to Good Samaritan, who drove the ambulance then?
McLaughlin.
And so firefighter McLaughlin's driving, where are you located within the ambulance?
I was in the back with Nuttall and Flamati.
Yeah, making
Do
sure
you
air
recall sort of
can get
specifically
into
what
his
anything
body.
you were doing with regard to patient care during the transport phase?
So I was just helping them transport phase. I was doing compressions before, but we had switched them over to a automatic compression device. So I was just involved in helping ventilate and suction.
The bile, mucus, and
was there
blood.
If anyone else in the back of the ambulance was also sort
Out of his throat so air could go in.
We've Nuttall and I forget who else.
Now, during the course of transport from the scene when you arrived to Good Samaritan, what, if any, change did you note in reference to Mr. O'Keefe as far as heart activity, respiratory, anything of the like?
No changes.
It's
Ms. Gilman, if I
that's
could,
sad.
ask for exhibit number 9, please.
all that epinephrine every 5 minutes. Epinephrine, no change. It's not
Fire
a
Kelly,
good
just directing your
sign.
attention to the screen and what's been marked as exhibit number 9. Do you recognize that?
Yes.
And where do you recognize that?
The location of the scene.
So the house that you responded to on January 29th, is that correct?
Correct.
And Ms.
34 Fairview.
Exhibit number 18.
It's just laying the foundation that he recognizes the house. He was there. It's true. He was there.
Yes.
What's depicted in that photograph?
The location of the scene again.
Sort of a different view of the same home, is that correct?
Correct.
May I approach the witness, Sean?
Yes.
This is the laser pointer, basically, there's a button there, just press on that.
Okay.
He's giving him a laser pointer.
All right, Fire Kelly, with using that laser pointer that you have now before you, if you could, please direct the jury's attention on the screen to whereabouts you located Mr. O'Keefe in that supine position when you first left.
It's about this area right here.
Oh, I can't. It's hard to see.
Thanks.
When he was
I have nothing further to this witness.
All right, cross-examination.
Yes, may we approach for a minute?
cross. That was-
Jurors, remember,
okay.
you can stand up and stretch anytime you go to sleep.
Honestly, I'm gonna go run around. Actually, you know what? Take a break too. Take a stretch break. Take a stretch break. I'll be listening. Take a stretch break.
Good morning, sir. Mr. Kelly, you and I have never met before, correct?
Correct.
We've never had a conversation
Correct.
in or out of court.
Correct.
Now, with regard to the clothing that John O'Keefe was wearing when you came upon him, I believe you remembered that he had on a pair of jeans,
To the best of my recollection, yes.
and you remembered that he had a hoodie sweatshirt.
Yes.
And what also stuck out in your mind is that he had only one shoe on, correct?
Correct.
From your memory, you're not sure if it was the left or the right shoe, but it was one of those, correct?
Correct.
And you did not see another shoe or the matching shoe in the area anywhere around where he was lying, correct?
Correct.
And to your memory, you never saw that other shoe, correct?
Correct.
Now, with regard to the removal of the clothing, I believe you testified before this jury on direct examination that trauma shears would have been used. Is that accurate?
The shoe.
And what would those look like? How big are
I was
they?
listening. And then I got distracted by
About
plushies.
This big, so say 6 inches.
Show me.
And they have usually a plastic or metal handle, and then just kind of 2 curved blades that are used to cut.
And are they essentially a large pair of scissors?
Yes.
And
Yeah,
are they
that-
sharp in terms of the blades?
Yes.
Sharp to cut, but
They need to be
made
somewhat
to not harm
heavy duty because you don't
the
know
person.
what type of clothing you're going to have to cut through, correct?
Correct.
Where was it that the trauma shears were used in order to start to remove John O'Keefe's clothing that morning?
I don't recall.
Do you recall if it was before he was put into the ambulance, during the ambulance ride, or after he was at the hospital?
I believe it would, I don't recall, but I believe it would be in the ambulance.
I'm sorry, there's a little bit of noise. Could you repeat that?
Sure. I don't recall, but I believe it would be in the ambulance.
In the ambulance. And you wouldn't have waited until you got to the hospital because there was a reason why you were taking the clothes off, correct?
Correct.
because
And
they
what was
were
that
wet and
reason?
he was cold and he needed to warm up.
Look for any other injuries that the patient might have.
And that was a
That too.
priority as you were treating him, correct?
Correct.
You don't think that you cut off his clothes before you put him in the ambulance, correct?
Correct.
And you don't think that, and when I say you, I mean your team.
Right.
You don't think your team cut off the clothes after he was out of the ambulance, correct?
Correct.
So it was sometime during the ride.
Correct.
Do you recall who it was that actually used the trauma shears along that ride?
No.
Do you recall at what point during the ride, would it have been sort of the beginning of the ride or would it have been toward the end?
Toward the beginning.
Now, with regard to the clothing that was cut, do you recall if it was the sweatshirt, the jeans, or both?
I don't recall.
do you think, or is your memory that the hoodie sweatshirt was left on him without being cut?
I don't recall.
Where did that clothing go after it was cut by the trauma shears during that ride?
Some of it would stay right on the stretcher, but I don't recall on all of it.
Okay. And some of it could have been on the floor of the ambulance as well?
Potentially.
That is
And then
leading, but it's
once
cross. They're allowed to
the,
lead and cross. A
ambulance
leading
arrives
question,
at
sort
the
of.
hospital,
Here's
what
the
is
answer
protocol
to the
regarding
question.
clothing
Is that
had
true?
been
Yes or
cut?
no?
It gets transferred over to the RN in charge of the patient and usually stays in their room. Usually they'll put it in some sort of bag.
Okay. And is
The clothes are
clothing
the
put in
last
bag?
of their
Does somebody
concerns.
meet you out at the ambulance in order to collect the clothing, or do you bring the clothing into the hospital in order to transfer it to
In
an
this
RN?
particular
Bring
case.
it in.
And do you recall who it was that brought in that clothing?
No.
Who was with
I'm
you
sure
at
there
that
are
time
cases
going
where
into
the
hospital from
EMTs
ambulance?
care
Not
about
all
the
in Flamatt.
clothes.
So it had to be one of the three of you that delivered that
But for
clothing
this,
to an RN.
it
correct?
wasn't a care, so
Do
they
you know if
they
all the
were not
clothing was
putting
delivered to an
energy
RN, or if some stayed
into
in the
keeping track of
ambulance?
it.
I don't recall.
And once you give the clothing to the RN, do you see where she takes it?
He does
don't
look
recall.
very
Did
young.
you
He
go
does look
into
very
the
young.
treatment room wherever John O'Keefe was brought once he was at the hospital?
Yes.
And you had previously testified that you believe the clothing would have been brought in with him, correct?
Correct.
Do you have a memory of seeing that clothing within that treatment room at the hospital?
I don't recall.
Do you recall seeing the clothing on the floor?
Sorry.
I don't recall.
Now let's get back to when you first arrived on scene. And actually, but before I get to that, I did want to ask you a couple of questions about where you were at in terms of your career on January 28th, 29th.
Yes.
You were a fairly new firefighter,
Correct.
and you were conscious, you had been trained not long before January 29th, right? It was within several months?
2 months, yeah.
Oh, within 2 months, okay.
2
and
months.
Your
He was
priority as a
2
new
months.
firefighter was to follow your training, correct?
Correct.
It was
2
fresh in your
months.
mind.
Correct.
Out
You
of
wanted to
training.
do things the right way, correct?
Correct.
And particularly at the beginning of your career, you don't want to develop any bad habits, correct?
Correct.
Hmm.
And so
All
you were
right, where you
following
going?
protocol once you got to the scene as best you could, correct?
Correct.
Protocol's fresh in his
I
brain.
believe you testified on direct examination that when the ambulance got to 34 Fairview, as soon as it was parked, you and Anthony Flamati went straight to the body, correct?
I don't recall saying that. I wasn't sure who went straight to the body. I said some of us got some supplies.
Okay. I thought your testimony, correct me if I'm wrong, but I thought your testimony was that you may have gotten some supplies, but then you and Flamati went straight to the body.
Yes, so we did, me and Nuttall.
Okay.
Got supplies?
Me and Nuttall went to the body.
All right, where was
But we didn't go straight there. We got supplies first and then went to the body. Or I got supplies first and then went to the body.
Okay. How long did it take you to get supplies?
Probably within a minute, I would say.
Okay.
He knows
And
where they
was
are.
Flamati when you were getting supplies?
I don't recall.
Once you got to the
We
body,
don't.
who assisted you with regard to treating John O'Keefe?
I believe it would be the people who were on scene with me.
Who would that have been?
Flamati, Nuttall, Walsh, McLaughlin, Woodbury, and Robery.
Okay. So is it your testimony that your memory is that 5, 6, however many people were there with you, all were hovered over John O'Keefe doing treatment on him?
Not treatment, but getting supplies, getting the stretcher. We're all working together, but we weren't all in the treatment portion.
Sure. And the treatment was essentially CPR, correct?
Correct.
Chest compressions?
Yes.
And dealing with his airway as well?
Correct.
Which of your coworkers and or you were directly involved with the CPR, the chest compressions, and the airway issues?
I recall that I was doing compressions and helping suction and ventilate in the ambulance, but I do not recall who else was partaking in that.
So
Well,
let's talk about when John O'Keefe was put on the scoop stretcher and then ultimately taken to the ambulance. Who was with you when that was occurring?
So it would have been me, Nuttall, Flamati, and Robery, I believe, were trying to get him on the scoop. And then I believe the engine guys were trying to get the stretcher.
Who are the engine guys?
That would be Walsh. It must have been Walsh, Woodbury, and McLaughlin, but I don't recall who exactly was.
Police Officer Stephen Mullaney said he was helping you as well.
Amati were loading John O'Keefe onto the scoop.
I believe so, yeah.
What about Police Officer Stephen Mullaney?
Correct.
And then who would it have been that wheeled the stretcher to the ambulance?
I don't recall who it was.
You?
I don't recall.
So you have no memory of who would have taken John O'Keefe on that stretcher into the back of the ambulance?
I don't recall who actually did it, but it would just be whoever's in the best location at the time to move the stretcher.
All right. Do you have a memory of John O'Keefe going into the back of the ambulance?
Not a clear memory, no.
Who went into the ambulance with him?
Me, Nuttall, Flamati, Walsh,
Wait.
Woodbury.
Oh. And
Is he
by the
just
way,
confused by the
once he's
questions?
on the scoop and then put on the stretcher, the priority is to get him into that ambulance, correct?
Correct.
And
Yeah.
part of the reason for that is he was cold, correct?
Yes, sir.
And your priority was you wanted to warm him up, correct?
Correct.
And the best place to do that would have been the inside of that ambulance, correct?
Yeah.
Correct.
So it wasn't that he was put on the stretcher and then there was some detour in terms of where he was taken. You made or whoever took him, made a beeline for the back of that ambulance in order to get him warm, correct?
Correct.
And once he's in the ambulance, the priority at that point would be to close the doors of the ambulance, correct?
Correct.
Because if you leave the doors open, there's a blizzard outside, correct?
Objection.
Sustained. Let's go ahead, Ms. Dean. Keep moving forward, please.
Well,
And so the doors were closed to the ambulance, correct?
At some point, yes.
All right. And inside the doors of that ambulance, as you testified, was at least, not naming everybody, but at least you and
All
Nuttall
right.
and Flamati, correct?
Correct.
oof.
And once those doors were closed to the ambulance, none of you left the ambulance, correct?
None of us, meaning
I'm not talking specifically about you and Nuttall and Flamati.
I don't believe so.
Did you
would have
guys
remained in
open the
ambulance
doors
all
and
way
leave
to
again?
The hospital, and that's the point in which the doors will be open, correct?
Correct.
All right. Now, I'd like to ask you some questions about the scene that you came upon in terms of the people who were there when you arrived.
Right.
sir.
Yeah. Thank
You
you.
previously testified that you saw, I believe you testified that you saw two women
Two women?
and a law enforcement officer already on.
What is
scene.
that?
Correct.
What just
One
happened?
of those women appeared to have blood around her mouth, correct?
Correct.
It was something red, but you assumed that it was blood, correct?
Correct.
And that led you to also
that?
believe that she had rendered or tried to render CPR, correct?
Objection.
Is that what you thought?
Yes.
Oof.
And while you were on scene, it was the woman who had the blood around her mouth who appeared to be most upset, correct?
Correct.
She was really upset, correct?
Yes.
Would you go so far as to say she was distraught,
Yes.
hysterical,
Yes.
frantic?
Yes.
And you heard her say, he's dead, he's fucking dead, something like that, correct?
Correct.
And she didn't say it in the tone of voice that I just said it, correct?
Correct.
She was screaming when she said that, correct?
Correct.
It was very easy for you to discern that her words were, he's dead, he's fucking dead, correct?
Correct.
And she repeated it more than once, correct?
Correct.
And it's fair to say that at no point in time
That's fun.
did you ever hear her say, I hit him, I hit him, I hit him, correct?
Correct.
And you would agree with me, sir, that you have been extremely consistent in terms of your memory of what she said, correct?
Correct.
You've been asked these questions not for the first time by Mr. Lally or me in court today. There have been other occasions where people have asked you, what did the woman with the blood on her mouth say when she was on scene, correct?
Correct.
You were asked that by Trooper Proctor on February 9th of 2022, correct?
I don't recall.
It's probably unfair of me to say the date, but you do recall speaking to a state trooper not long after these incidents, correct?
Correct.
And to that state trooper, you told him that what she said was, he's dead, he's fucking dead, correct?
I don't recall.
You don't recall saying anything differently than that, do you?
Sorry, I am so distracted right
I
now.
remember
There's reactions.
Saying a lot differently, but I might have also said that. I just don't recall.
Well, let me rephrase that. You don't recall changing her words at all. You've always said he's dead, he's fucking dead, correct?
Correct.
That was not only to the state police on February 9th, but then in April of 2022, you were in a grand jury setting, correct?
Correct.
There was no defense attorney there on that day, correct?
I'm losing.
You don't remember seeing me there?
No,
Losing
I
it.
didn't see
Okay. Mr. Lally was asking.
He's
the questions, correct?
confused by these
And
questions.
there, you also said that what the woman with the blood on her mouth said was, he's dead, he's fucking dead, correct?
Correct.
When you get to curse
And you
in
testified to that
court.
today.
Yes, sir.
You've never changed that story, correct?
Correct.
And that is because the truth does not change, correct?
Correct.
All right, at this point, I'd like to play
Because the truth does
a
not change.
15-second portion of a video, which I would offer as the next exhibit, Your Honor.
Okay, so we'll watch it and then you can
Thank you
offer
very
it
much.
with no narration, right?
Never. And before you start, I'm not as interested in the video, sir. I'm interested in the audio. So if you could listen as best you can.
Okay. Audio is more important.
Would you agree with me, sir, that we heard what you heard that night, which is he's dead, he's fucking dead?
It was kind of hard for me to hear.
Okay.
I heard about, does he do drugs? I couldn't really hear the background.
I made a moment.
Okay.
Garbage, potato, trash
Okay.
footage. It's the wind. For audio, the wind is going to cause a significant problem, and for this trial, the wind is also going to cause a significant problem. The defense is seeming to show a little bit more respect to this paramedic due to them not having that moment of, well, you never told literally anybody else that she said, I hit him. He is saying the same things that he has said in all of his testimonies. So there are a lot of questions that he did kind of do that build into, okay, here's this question. I'm going to really give it to you. And then we had that kind of peak of like, because the truth is the truth and it doesn't change. And he's like, yeah, okay, I'm just telling you what I know, Yes. Very interesting. Oh, we don't need to read her. We don't need to do that.
Play it one more time.
I'll try my best.
So again, and by the way, before it's queued up, I would direct your attention more toward the beginning of that 15 seconds. As there are things that happen, I think, that you heard at the end, but you tell us if you can hear or what you can hear.
Okay.
All right, here we go. I heard a very faint, he's dead.
I heard someone say fucking dead.
Thanks.
Huh.
Any redirect?
Just briefly on.
Redirect.
Mr. Kelly, from that video, it was just up on the screen. You indicated that when you got to the scene, you saw the cruiser and parked sort of behind the cruiser, correct?
Around the cruiser, yeah.
So from that video, you didn't see the ambulance that you were driving anywhere in, correct?
Correct.
You have no idea whether or not you were even on scene at that time that any of those statements that were made in that video were made, correct?
Correct.
Now, as far as patient care was concerned, were sort of all of you, being yourself, firefighter Flamati, firefighter Nuttall, firefighter McLaughlin, firefighter Walsh, firefighter Woodbury, were you all together all the time, or were you doing separate things in separate places during the course of your time on scene?
Separate things in separate places, yeah.
So fair to say that
Separate
everything that you
things,
heard
separate
may not be
places.
someone else that was there
Sup,
from your
brother?
that day, correct?
Correct.
And conversely, something that someone else heard may not be necessarily something that you were in a position to hear that day, correct?
Correct.
You also asked some questions about sort of using the shears and cutting off Mr. O'Keefe's clothing during the ride. Is it your testimony that that was in the back of the ambulance, correct?
Correct.
Was that during the transport, or was that prior? Would you be utilizing shears on a patient, cutting off clothing while the ambulance is in transit?
No.
So if it was in the back of the ambulance, that would have been prior to the ambulance leaving the scene and going to its merit, correct?
Correct.
Nothing.
Your Honor, the only thing I would offer is the video that I played. I
All
have.
right, so we will do that.
Thank
So, Mr. Clerk, it's already been pre-marked, right? Do you not have it, Nancy? Okay.
Oh, I'm sorry. I was mistaken.
Pre-marked, not pre-mocked. She said pre-mocked,
Thank you.
but not M-O-C-K-E-D, pre-marked, M-A-R-K-E-D. Oh, when the accent comes out, the accent comes out. It's glorious, glorious. Pre-mocked. I love it. I love it. I love it. I love it. It's so good.
All right. So we're all set?
Yes, thank you, Your Honor.
Okay.
Thank you, you're all set.
Thank you.
All right, all done with him? All done with Matthew Kelly. On to the next. Please be another paramedic to tell us about the snow.
Your next witness.
Yes, Your Honor. Call Mr. Francis Walsh to the stand.
Okay.
Francis Walsh.
Tori, what do you have for today? Numbers.
You solemnly swear the evidence given to the court and jury in the case I'm hearing should be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God.
Pre-mock.
Okay, whenever you're ready, Mr. Lally.
Thank you. Good afternoon, sir. Good afternoon. Could you please state your name and spell your last name?
Francis Walsh, W-A-L-S-H.
And what do you do for us?
I'm a lieutenant paramedic with the Canton Fire Department.
And how long have you been a firefighter paramedic with Canton?
Lieutenant
Just shy of 10
paramedic,
years.
Canton Fire
indicated that you
Department.
have a
Canton Fire
That's
Department.
correct.
How long have you been a
Pre-mocked.
lieutenant with Canton?
Since September of last year.
Now, with regards to, you have certifications both as an EMT and a paramedic, correct?
That's correct.
And with regard to those certifications, when was it first that you sort of received those?
I received my paramedic certification in June of 2014. That's when I was officially certified.
Is that something that you've been subject to sort of continuing educational components and recertification since then?
Yes, yeah, every 2 years we have to recertify and take continuing education classes.
Yes, they talked a lot about it.
Certification up to
Every 2 years.
is your certification up to speed at this point?
Yeah, it's current. I just recertified last month, actually.
Yeah.
Now, if I could turn your attention to the evening of January 28th into January 29th, 2000.
The day
Oh,
of
that
the
day.
I do.
meta.
And were you working that day with the fire?
I was.
And what kind of shift were you working on that occasion?
24-hour shift, which is standard.
And is that 8
Everyone
a.m.
was
to 8
doing
a.m.?
24-hour
That's
shifts.
correct.
Is that, correct me if I'm wrong, but that would be 8 a.m. on the 28th until 8 a.m. on the 29th.
That's correct.
And so where were you assigned to on that particular day?
I was assigned to headquarters, which is on 99 Revere Street, and my position was engine driver.
So
Engine
fair to say people within
driver.
your department get different sort of assignments on different apparatus based on the different shifts that they're working.
That's correct.
And your assignment that day was the driver of the engine.
Correct, yes, engine 3.
Now, beyond sort of your assignment as the engine driver on that particular,
Describe me the weather of that night.
what if any sort of specialized assignment do you have, or did you have at that time in regard to snow removal?
Yeah, so on that particular shift, I was also the snowplow driver. We have an in-house truck and a snowplow for the fire department, and that was my responsibility on that shift.
How many people within your department have that sort of responsibility when it comes to
It kind of depends group to group. So some working groups will just kind of rotate and have a different person do it each time. At that time, the group that I was on, I kind of had the most experience plowing, so I was always the go-to person to be in the plow truck when it snowed.
That's fair.
And so with respect
I would not volunteer to plow something because I've never plowed anything.
I believe it was around 4 a.m.
And why was it that you got up at that?
It was snowing pretty heavily. I mean, we knew the forecast called for a lot of snow, so I got up early and hopped in the plow truck.
Forecasted blizzard.
So just briefly, in addition to the snow, what if anything else did you observe as far as the weather conditions when you were out in the plow truck?
It was very windy. Yeah, just windy and really heavy snow.
Was it gusty or
Now,
consistent
at some
wind?
point, shortly after 6 a.m., does your department get dispatched to a call?
Yes.
And where was the dispatch to, and what was it in regards to?
So I didn't hear the actual dispatch because I was in the plow truck. I was in the rear of headquarters in the plow truck. But my Captain Rovery, came out and told me that we had a call for 34 Fairview Road for an unresponsive male party. And he told me, to hop in the engine and head to that call.
And when you hop in the engine, who, if anyone else in your department, was assigned to the same engine as you on that day?
So I had Lieutenant Woodbury to my right in the passenger seat and firefighter McLaughlin in the rear.
And beyond the engine that you were driving, what if any sort of other apparatus from the department of dispatch would call that?
So that would have been ambulance 1, and then also car 5 went as well. That's kind of like an optional thing, but with a call of that severity, the captain will go as well.
And who was in car 5 on that day?
Captain Robery.
And you drove the engine, is that correct?
That's correct.
If you could describe for the jury sort of what you observed as far as the road conditions, visibility, things that like en route from the station to Fairview.
Yeah, so it was really, really poor driving conditions and visibility. I can't recall ever driving to a call of that nature and that severity that slowly. The visibility was so poor that we were just driving extremely slow.
Sirens go further away. Okay, and from, if you could describe to the jury sort of the route of travel that you took from Station 1 to Fairview.
Sure. So out of Station 1, take a right onto Revere Street, and then a left onto Sherman Street, a right onto Chapman Street, and then a left onto Fairview.
Now, if you recall, what was sort of the order? You're all sort of dispatching, you're all sort of responding around the same time, being car 5, the ambulance, and the engine, correct?
Correct.
And if you recall, what was sort of the order of the vehicles in response?
So engine 3, we were the last vehicle for the fire department to arrive on scene. So when we arrived on scene, ambulance 1 and car 5 were already on scene.
And if I could ask, just sort of as you're turning onto Fairview Road and you travel down it, what, if anything, do you know about sort of the elevation of the roadway as you're driving down to it?
It's a downhill grade. Yeah, it gets a little bit steep at one point.
And the residence that you eventually stopped at or responded to, where was that in location in reference to when you first turn on to Fairview, about how far down is the residence that you eventually go?
Pretty far down. I believe it's one of the last houses on Fairview.
And the residence that we're talking about is, from your perspective, when you're driving down there, is that on your left or right or something else?
Left.
And as you're approaching the scene, what is it sort of that you see before you? As you know, how do you know where to stop and where you're going?
Yeah, so I mean, like I said, visibility was really poor, but there was ambulance 1, car 5, at least a couple of police cruisers on scene before us, so it's kind of hard to miss that. So that's how we knew where to stop.
Now, in regard to you're responding to an unresponsive Nick, correct?
Correct.
And just to be clear, at some point you were able to identify, or you were told what the identity was of that unresponsive notification, correct?
That's correct.
And what was his name?
John O'Keefe.
And so with respect to Mr. O'Keefe, as you're approaching the scene, when was the first time that you were able to sort of see where Mr. O'Keefe was on scene when you arrived?
It wasn't until a little bit after we actually arrived on scene that I could see the patient, because as we pulled up, the ambulance was blocking our line of sight to where the patient was. So I couldn't see him right away.
And what was sort of the I know you talked about visibility, but as far as had the sun come up yet?
No, it was pitch black.
And so when you arrive on scene, what is it that you and sort of the other people on your engine are doing in relation to patient treatment?
So at that point, I got out of the engine and I started walking towards where the ambulance crew was. But at that point, firefighter McLaughlin was coming around to the rear of the ambulance to get the stretcher out. So I went directly to that to give her a hand with that. And we proceeded to bring that around the front of the ambulance where firefighter Nuttall, Flamati, and Kelly, and I believe Captain Robery were working on the patient.
Now, in reference to where patient Mr. O'Keefe was, where was he? Could you see sort of how in reference to the ground?
I could see they had.
I'm back.
The other firefighters and captain that I just mentioned had just put him on the backboard at the first time that I saw him. I'd say that was like roughly 10 feet in from the road.
And to that point, how were you able to say that it was approximately 10 feet in from the road?
Just an estimate.
Let me ask you, as far as the stretcher was concerned that you and firefighter McLaughlin retrieved, where did you place that in relation to where Mr. O'Keefe was when you first arrived?
So we placed that. We decided to leave it on the street and get it as close to the grass or snow as possible. It was unspoken, but we knew that we didn't want to put the stretcher onto the snow if it would be too unstable. So we put it right up against the curb, so right at the edge of the street where the street meets the yard.
And so you put the stretcher basically right up against the curb, and Mr. O'Keefe was approximately 10 feet.
That's correct.
And with respect to positioning the stretcher, was that parallel with the curb or perpendicular to it, or how was it?
Parallel.
And you mentioned that obviously Mr. O'Keefe is on scene, and there are a number of different firefighters in your department, correct?
That's correct.
There was at least a police cruiser. Did you see any officers sort of around the scene?
Yes, I remember Officer Saraf and Sergeant Good.
And with respect,
Where was Mulaney?
civilians, what if any civilians?
Who was helping you?
I observed 2 female civilians.
And
Two.
were they in relation to where you were, or in relation to where Mr. O'Keefe?
I want to know where the third woman went to.
I mean, they were pretty
I want to
worked
know
up,
where
so
the
they were
third
moving
woman
around
went.
quite a bit. But I'd say they were somewhere in between myself and the stretcher and where Mr. O'Keefe was.
And did you yourself have any conversation with either of the 2 females as yourself?
I did not directly, no.
And you just testified a little bit before that they were upset. Is this sort of both of them were?
Yes, yes.
And what, if anything, leads you to that sort of conclusion as far as their demeanor? What, if anything, did you specifically observe?
I mean, I observed one of them like screaming and crying, and they were both just frantically like moving around a lot.
As far as the one that you observed screaming or crying, do you recall specifically what, if anything, that person said?
All
What
I
did she
recall
say?
her saying was, "Is he alive?"
So he heard, "Is he alive?"
To Mr. O'Keefe, as far as
Not, "I hit him."
What, if any, observations did you make?
He heard Karen scream, "Is he
The
alive?"
notable observation
Not,
that I made
hit
was
him.
that he was missing one shoe, his right shoe.
Okay, he made a note. He was missing a shoe. His
And
right shoe.
Where was Mr. O'Keefe?
Right shoe was
when
missing.
you made that observation of missing one shoe?
It was when we put the stretcher into the ambulance. The stretcher lifts up, so it's kind of right at my face, and that's when I noticed it.
Is he alive? Is he
Time
alive?
placed in the ambulance, and he had one shoe based on what you
I
said.
hit
That's
him. I hit him. He's dead. He's fucking dead.
Now, once Mr. O'Keefe is
She's
in the
saying a
back of the
lot.
ambulance, where did you go?
What's true?
So I
What's
stayed
false?
down at the feet. I was positioned right by his right leg.
And what, if any, difference
He's on the
do you know
opposite
between
side
the lighting conditions
of,
outside the lawn versus the lighting conditions inside?
In the back of the ambulance, it was
Matthew
dramatically
Kelly.
better.
So once in the back of the ambulance, what, if anything, did you note or observe as far as injuries to Mr. O'Keefe?
I noticed a hematoma on his right eye, and I noticed some blood coming from his nose.
And just to be clear for the record, so when you say hematoma, based on your training experience, can you explain what your understanding of that term is to the jury?
Swelling and bruising.
Hematoma, swelling and bruising, right eye.
Now, at some point, with respect to the clothing that Mr. O'Keefe was wearing, what, if anything, did you or other firefighters or paramedics in your department do with reference to Mr. O'Keefe's clothing?
We removed all of his clothing.
What was he wearing? Was he wearing a
First,
coat?
How was that removal sort of accomplished?
Can you repeat that?
When you removed his clothing, how was that? How did you do that?
Oh, with trauma shears, basically scissors that cut clothing.
And once sort of, was that pursuant to some sort of protocol, or
Yes.
why was the clothing?
On any trauma call, it's protocol to expose the patient so you can see all injuries and you don't miss any injuries.
And once the clothing was removed with the trauma shears, what, if any, additional injuries or anything?
What else did you see?
I
Any
noticed
more?
some scratches and lacerations on his right arm.
Right arm, furrows.
Now, in reference
Scratches.
to treatment in the back of the ambulance, with regard
What
to Mr. O'Keefe, what, if any, sort of
caused the scratches?
role in that did you sort of assume, or were you sort of assigned by the lead paramedic?
Yeah,
Did
so I
you
was
see any red
responsible for
plastic
the IO drill and access.
The IO drill.
intraosseous
Whew.
access.
Can you explain to the jury sort of what that is and how that's accomplished?
Again?
Yeah, so you do that instead of IV access. So when somebody's in cardiac arrest, it's really hard to get an IV. So what you do is you actually drill into a bone, and you can administer medication and fluids like into the bone marrow space.
It's almost worse the second time they
pursuant
say
to,
it.
So
I'm not good. I could never be a
O'Keefe
nurse,
was,
doctor,
undergoing,
anything, EMT. I could never.
cardiac arrest, correct?
Correct.
Can you explain your understanding of that term based on your training experience for jury? What is cardiac arrest?
There's no cardiac function. His heart isn't pumping blood anymore.
Heart don't work.
So what, if any, sort of protocols are there as far as medication administration is there in reference to a cardiac arrest?
Yeah, so the frontline medication for that is epinephrine. That's what we
And they were
gave
doing
for the IO
epinephrine
access.
every 5 minutes. I know,
Epinephrine,
Ronnie. I
I mean,
know.
basically in layman's terms, it gets the heart pumping again if that's a viable option.
I know. I know.
And in addition to the epinephrine,
Same.
what kind of medication was administered through the IO?
I believe that was it. As far as when I was on scene, it was just epinephrine.
Just epinephrine to try to get.
Oh yeah, saline as well, but it's not a medication. But yeah, we also administered saline.
Ah, okay.
Saline is just to increase blood volume.
He's like, I've been along long enough. Like, I've been around
As
long
far
enough.
as,
Ask me the right questions. I'll give you the answers you want, but I'm not just going to answer
as far as the
random
transport,
things
Mr.
and look
O'Keefe
silly
mentioned
saying
from
salines
the
and medication because it's
Correct.
not.
Did you go
Interesting.
along
Smart
with the
guy.
ambulance on the
Well,
transport to the
I
Smart
did
hospital?
not.
answer.
So you were
Smart
in
ass.
St. Louis for some period of time, correct?
Very briefly, but yes.
And you referenced some officers from the Canton Police Department that were on scene when you were on, correct?
Correct.
And without reference to anything said, which of them, if any, did you have any conversation with prior to leaving the scene?
Sergeant Good.
And just as far as what you told Sergeant Good, what, if anything, did you relay to him before you left the scene?
I relayed to him that there were signs of trauma in the patient.
And did you give any sort of further explanation as to the signs of trauma that you observed?
Yes, I believe I told him what I told you about the hematoma on the eye and the blood in the nose and the scratches and lacerations on the arm.
So you told Sergeant Good what you just testified to the jury that you observed.
What about the belly?
That's
What about
I believe so.
distended belly? The guy said he had a distended or bloated
If I could ask for,
stomach area.
number 18.
Is this the house that you went to? How was the weather that night?
Firefighter Walsh, what's up on the screen is Exhibit 18. Do you recognize that?
Yes, 34 Fairview Road.
Is that
Like, we don't have to show you again.
minus whatever it was
It's
that
the.
you found in the trail, what you observed that
We'll
day?
just leave it on him.
Yes.
Can I approach the witness just briefly?
Yes.
So this is again Exhibit 18.
Laser pointer. Hey, look.
And so Firefighter Walsh, if I
The
could ask you
flagpole.
from that laser pointer, if you could direct the jury's attention to where within this photograph that you observed Mr. O'Keefe's body when you first.
It's gonna be a long trial. It's gonna be a
Right in that
long
general
trial.
area.
Thanks. May I have one moment, Your Honor?
Yes.
No, you may not.
Good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon.
Questions for this witness, Your Honor?
All right. Cross
No further questions,
examination.
Cross?
I just want to ask you about the woman that you saw on scene who appeared to be screaming and crying. Would you agree with me that she stood out to you because she appeared to be the most upset
Yeah, I would agree with that. Yes.
and the loudest?
Yes.
The most frantic.
She appeared to be crying more than others,
Yes.
and she was screaming, right?
Yes.
And what
How
you
loud
heard
did
her
she say?
I understand your testimony, was that she just said, "Is he alive?" Correct?
That's what I recall. Correct.
In a
Is
loud
he
voice,
alive?
Yes.
in a distraught voice,
Yes.
while she was crying.
Correct.
I have nothing further.
There's nothing, Mr. Lally, right?
No.
All right, you are all set, sir. Thank you.
Thank you.
Who's your next witness?
Miss Katie McLaughlin.
Katie McLaughlin. That's a guess on how to spell her name. I liked that cross examination. I liked it. I mean, not just because of the length of it. It was clear that the only thing that there's an issue with, right, in this moment. Great.
Raise your right hand. You solemnly swear the
You
evidence
guys
of the court and jury in the case
showed
now
up.
herein
You
shall
did
be
your
the truth,
job.
nothing but the truth, so help you God.
You helped.
Okay, you can have a seat. I just need you to
But
speak into that
what
microphone
did
nice and
she
loud.
say? Because someone is lying.
Okay, whenever you're ready, Mr. Lally.
Good afternoon. Could you please state your name and spell your last name, please?
It's Katie McLaughlin, McLaughlin.
I spelled it right.
I'm a firefighter paramedic for the town of Canton.
And how long have you been a firefighter paramedic in the town?
Probably about 7 years at this point.
And prior to working for the Canton Fire Department, what, if any, other work did you do sort of within that general field?
I worked as an EMT basic for Brewster Ambulance. Went to paramedic school. I eventually became a paramedic for Brewster Ambulance, and I worked there for a few years before getting on the fire department.
Would I appreciate her getting close to the microphone, acknowledging that her voice is probably softer? I appreciate that.
What was sort of,
Thank
what
you.
sort of training did you receive in regard, or certification did you receive in regard to being a paramedic?
So it's a 2-year schooling where you have about a year of didactic. There's a lecture portion for about a year. And then after that, there's about a year to a year and a half of clinical training that's done in an ER and then done in an ambulance. So that whole period is around 2 years.
And prior to working with the Camp Fire Department, you received certification from the state or some other sources being paramedic, correct?
Yes, it's through the state and through a national registry.
And both those certifications through the state and the national registry, are those granted sort of forever, or is there like a continuing educational component and a recertification process?
Of course,
So you recertify every 2 years. You have to take continuing education classes in that 2-year period.
We've learned
and
this.
that's just on a 2-year cycle. You recertify.
Because of how fast things change in medicine, and
Yes.
Protocols can get bettered, and yeah,
The dates of January
every 2 years.
2022 into January 29th.
So if you want to be an EMT or paramedic or a firefighter, paramedic, EMT, whatever, be prepared to recertify every 2 years. You have to keep up with your studies. Medicine is a
It was
practice.
just my regular 24-hour shift.
And 24-hour shift in Camp Fire is essentially 8 a.m. to 8 a.m. Is that correct?
Correct.
Everyone does the
And
24-hour
where were you
shifts.
Sort of assigned within the town of Camp Fire Department on that day.
So I was on the engine for that shift. So I was the third person on the engine. There's an engine driver, there's an officer, and then there's a third person who's in the back.
And so your sort of role with respect to the engine, is there sort of like a name for that position?
Some people call it like the back step. Yeah.
And which station house were you assigned to on that engine?
The station 1, which is 99 Revere Street.
99 Revere Street.
And in addition to yourself, if anyone else was assigned to the other sorts of roles on the engine?
Frank Walsh was the engine driver that day, and Greg Woodbury was the lieutenant on the engine that day.
Now, turning your attention to that morning of 29th, do you recall about what time you got up or what time you went outside that day?
Early, because it was snowing.
I think we were up maybe a little before 6 because it was snowing, and we had to like shovel the front apron. So we were up maybe 5 a.m.
It was early. They had to shovel. There can't be too much snow where the engine will hit the top of the
Intermittently.
garage doors.
Intermittently, yeah.
So during the times that you were outside shoveling, what, if anything, did you observe as far as the weather?
The wind was brutal.
It was
The snow
snowing
was
pretty
coming
heavily.
down.
It had been snowing.
Roads
we
looked
were shoveling,
bad.
and it was pretty cold and windy.
And if you know around that time that you initially sort of went out and were shoveling, how much?
I'm glad they're covering the weather because it's important.
I don't know how much. I mean, enough for us to shovel that front apron, but I don't know how much.
Sometime shortly
It's
after
going to
6
be
a.m.,
annoying, but
you
you
and
just
other
have to laugh
department
because
dispatchers were called.
Yes.
it needs to be done.
And where were you dispatched?
Unfortunately. Unless the
So
judge is like, by the way,
call came
it was
in
snowing and
as
windy that day.
a man
we
down
don't have to
in the
cover
snow
it anymore.
or a man unresponsive in the
But I
snow.
don't think she will.
And the call was 434 Fairview Road.
And
Not 434. It was 434 Fairview
receive
Road.
that dispatch and go sort of on the engine to that residence on Fairview Road.
Oh my God.
long?
Speak up.
We're on the truck and going probably within a few minutes at most.
They stay ready.
To yourself and Firefighter Walsh and Lieutenant Woodbury, what, if any, other sort of apparatus from your station was dispatched to this call?
The ambulance was dispatched as well, and I believe the command car 5, also was dispatched to the call.
And as far as car 5, if you recall, who was in car 5?
At the time, Captain Robery.
And with respect to the ambulance, if you know who, if anyone, was assigned to the ambulance and went with the ambulance.
Firefighter Kelly and Firefighter Flamati were on that ambulance, and I believe Tim Nuttall was also there. He came in early, and so he jumped on the ambulance as well.
Because Kelly also, it was there early. He was helped to relieve people, but he also recognized that Kelly was new and an extra hand would be useful.
Order of the vehicles were in as far as car 5 and the ambulance and the fire engine?
I think car 5 was maybe first, and then the ambulance was in front of us, and then we pulled up behind the ambulance.
And so when you sort of arrive on scene, pull up behind the ambulance, other than vehicles from your department, what, if any, other sort of vehicles did you observe or see on scene that day?
I noticed there were multiple police vehicles. and at least one civilian vehicle.
Now, obviously, you're responding to a report of.
How many women did you see on scene? How many civilians, other than
Yes.
the unresponsive man?
When you're sort of first arriving on scene, or just in reference to when you arrived on scene, when was the first time that you were able to see that unresponsive body?
So when I got out of the engine, I went right back to the ambulance to get the stretcher because I knew that
It would
from
be
wherever
needed.
they were, they seemed to be kind of in off of the road. So I went, got the stretcher with firefighter Walsh, I believe, and then we brought the stretcher as close as we could to the patient, and that was like parallel to the curb, and that would be the first time that I observed them working on a patient.
And so
Not
I'd like to
yet.
ask you just with regard to sort of those
We don't know yet.
as the backstep person. So
We have
what
so
are
many
sort of
more
the duties and
weeks.
responsibilities of the
So
backstep
many
person
more
on the engine,
weeks.
to this
So
kind of
many
matter?
weeks.
So the role of the person in the back of the engine is it kind of is dependent upon what that lead paramedic needs you to do. You're there to assist the ambulance in any way that they need. So that could be assisting with extrication of a patient. It could be obtaining information about a patient or bystanders. It could be assisting with patient care if they need you in the back of the ambulance. It really depends on what they need you to do for that particular call.
And turning back to your testimony just a moment ago that said they were over rendering sort of patient care, is that correct?
Yes.
What do you mean by that?
I noted Tim, I noted Tony, and there were a lot of people that seemed to be around that area. So I'm not sure exactly who else was there, but I did note Tony and Tim were in that area.
So as far as sort of the other people in that area where Tony and Tim, so people sort of beyond people from your department, what, if any, other sort of people did you notice around that?
I don't know specifically. What do you mean, like
As far
Like
as
outside
civilians.
of the?
right, so outside of fire department personnel in that area, what, if any, observations did you make of those people? Who are those people?
Well, at that point, I couldn't really make out like the identities of like other people. I noted Tim and Tony, but I didn't really pick up on who anyone else was at that point. They were still like in off of the road at that point.
And so from where they're positioned with regard
Ask a
to,
better question, I guess.
just for clarity purposes, you were subsequently learned the identity of the patient, correct?
Yes.
And who did you learn him?
John O'Keefe.
And
Did
where
you learn John
the
O'Keefe or did you learn
firefighter
police
also
officer John
directed?
O'Keefe?
How far away from where you were was Mr. O'Keefe and the other firefighter?
They were, I don't know that I could give a number, several feet away. They were like, I remember kind of seeing a fire hydrant, but I don't know exactly number wise what that would be.
I'm not great at that either.
In your observation of where
I'm not. I don't know how
did
far
you
away
know,
things are. I don't
how
know.
his body was positioned?
He was supine, so he was lying on his back or face up.
And what, if anything, by the time that you arrived with firefighter Walsh on the stretcher, what, if anything, could you see that firefighters Flamati and Nuttall or anyone else was doing with reference to Mr. O'Keefe?
By that point, it seemed like they had already got him pretty much secured on a backboard, and they were ready to move him to the stretcher.
And once Mr. O'Keefe is then moved to the backboard from where he was to the stretcher where you are, what happened?
So I remember Tony was kind of at the head of the stretcher. I was standing on the side. There was a woman next to me, and Tony said to me, "Can you try to figure out what happened?" And he kind of motioned to this woman that was next to me.
Was that woman frantically yelling,
Firefighter
"I hit
Flamati
him, I hit him"?
directs you to ask questions of this female, correct?
Yes.
And
Was she?
this woman that
Was she?
next to you,
What was she
you
saying?
know her, you never met her before.
No.
Did you take notes?
From your
Do you have a
conversations
pen?
with her that day, do you see that woman in the courtroom today?
Yes.
Can you just
She's like,
that's where
wait,
she's
just
doing
to
her-
double check.
That's record of like identification.
It's Karen.
Okay.
It's Karen, y'all.
Now, with respect
It's Karen
to
Reed.
this woman, she's standing next to you when you're at the side of the stretcher, correct?
Yes.
And what, if any, observations did you sort of initially make as far as her demeanor, or how was she sort of acting when you first started to engage?
She seemed very upset. very upset.
Was she running around screaming?
What about her did you observe that made you say that?
Just her facial expressions. She was just visibly distraught.
I'm visibly distraught right
So
now.
As far as
Was she yelling?
questions, what type of questions are you asking, or what type of information are you looking for from this person?
So just basic demographic info, who the patient is, his name, his date of birth. And then as far as any more questioning, you're trying to gather information that would basically help explain how this person ended up in the scenario that they're in.
Pretend you're a
So
cop
did
right
he have
now
any
and ask
medical
some questions.
problems? Does he take any medications daily? Does he have any
Pretend
allergies to
you're a cop.
medications?
And
I was
then
asking
give that
those
information
questions.
Right?
And as
Is
you're
that-
asking those questions, what if anything is the defendant is doing while you're asking?
She answered who the patient was, his birthday. I think she answered the maybe some of those initial medical questions that I asked. But as I said, she's very distraught. She was kind of moving around the scene a little bit. So I was
Wait.
like,
Was
just
she
kind of following her, and then we came
moving
to a stop
around the
at
scene a
one
little bit,
point,
or like a lot of it?
I continued
Like,
to ask her.
Can't
asked one more
stand
question.
still because she's.
What was that one more question?
So at that point, I asked her if there had been any significant trauma that happened before this.
What if anything did she say?
So she said, I hit him. She repeated it. There was a woman standing across from her who I believe at that point said, you're hysterical. You need to calm down. You're hysterical. She repeated, I hit him. And there was a police officer who was in that vicinity kind of with us who replied, you what? She repeated it one more time. And that officer then signaled to somebody, get Goody down here, which I'm assuming would be the sergeant.
Okay, officer overheard. Finally, we're getting some like, hey, there's two sort of entities here taking care of a situation.
So we had this conversation, if you recall, you mentioned that the other person who was across from you was just, was that somebody from your department or an officer or a civilian? Who was
Okay.
So I was standing, Karen Reed was to my right. There was another woman to the left of me, kind of across from her. And then there was a police officer kind of not directly across from me, but within within the same kind of area that was more closer to Karen, I would say.
You know who that officer was?
I don't.
You know who the female or civilian person that was across from you? You know what that person's name is?
No.
And
She's like, I washed my hands of this. We got. He's like, I'm not involved in this, but you are involved, and I have questions.
She was very, very upset. She seemed hysterical, I would even say. Just very upset.
Was she yelling anything else? Did she say anything else?
Receive that information. Did you follow up with any other questions to Ms. Reed at that point?
Yeah. At that point, I did not.
No,
I have to drive the ambulance, so it's a time-sensitive situation. So I knew I had to drive the ambulance. It was said in the presence of the police officer, so I felt like that was the appropriate. That information was appropriately transferred, and I just felt based on her demeanor, I don't think it would have been productive for me to continue to ask her questions at that point.
Are you sure the officer heard her?
So after asking and receiving that answer of I hit him, where did you go?
So I went to the ambulance.
Okay, I know this isn't evidence, and this is all speculation in my brain. Are we sure the officer heard her say, I hit him, blah, blah, blah. And then hear the friend say, you're hysterical, you need to calm down, you're hysterical. And then the officer overhearing Karen say, I hit him, and then calling, get Goody down here. Could it have been a coincidental moment that officer, what I believe probably to be Saroff, heard or found out that this was Officer John O'Keefe on the ground unresponsive in the snow, and maybe not I hit him. I don't know. But this testimony isn't helping, but it's not making it worse like the other ones. But it's not necessarily helping my questions. What did she hit?
So I went to the back of the ambulance where the patient care was happening.
And as far as the information that you had received from the defendant, did you relay that information to any of the other firefighters from your department in the back of the
I did.
The prosecution says her car and that the red plastic shards from her
Tony was
taillight.
there, Tim,
But
I think maybe
does it?
firefighter Kelly,
None
firefighter
of these
Walsh maybe
people
might
have
have
found
been in there at that point.
any red plastic
Now, as far as
from a
when you
taillight.
get to the back of the ambulance, what, if anything, did you do with reference to assist or help as far as patient care with regard to Mr. O'Keefe?
I didn't assist or partake in any patient care.
Now, prior to putting Mr. O'Keefe into the back of the ambulance and prior to your conversation with the defendant, what, if any, observations had you made during the brief time that you were on the side of the stretcher of Mr. O'Keefe and then you?
I noted he had injuries to his face. I noticed some blood from his nose, from his mouth, and most notably, he had some swelling to his eyes, mostly the right eye, and a laceration above the right eye.
Mainly injuries in the face and on the arm. Only one guy mentioned was a distended belly.
Oh, I'm sorry. I observed those injuries in the back of the ambulance. I didn't observe those injuries while he was out on the stretcher. I didn't get a good look at him.
Is that because it's freaking dark out in the middle of the night?
Right.
Yeah, probably.
Now, as far as you indicated, you drove the ambulance from Fairview. Where did you go?
Good Samaritan Hospital.
And
right. As of right now, it's not lining up for me for her to have hit him with a car and him only have head injuries and only one.
There was poor visibility. The roads weren't plowed yet,
about
so it was
a distended belly or swollen belly.
Took probably longer than usual based on the conditions.
And I apologize, but if I can take you just a step back further for a moment, just in reference to when you're in the back of the ambulance, you indicated the injuries that you observed. What, if any, observations did you make as far as the clothing that Mr. O'Keefe was wearing?
What was he
wearing?
wearing?
That he was wearing jeans. I noticed a lighter, like a black zip-up jacket or sweatshirt. It was like a lighter jacket.
A light jacket.
I noticed he
or
had one sneaker on, and that was it.
Do you recall which foot the sneaker was on?
I don't.
All right, could I see counsel for a second, please?
All right, let's see if I can boot, scoot, and boogie through this until we hear some sound. All right, looks like things are coming on back. Might be the end of the day, might not. It might be the end of the day. We did pretty good catching up with 1.25 speed. Come on. All right, we are completely caught up and they are still in a moment of break. It is 1:03 on the East Coast where this is taking place, Dedham, Massachusetts. The judge does want to stop at 1:03. They might be having a quick conversation about if we're doing trial. 1.25 isn't bad at all. Yeah, honestly, at some points we probably could have went up to 1.5 because like the news talk's kind of slow at some of those points. It looks like court is all done for the day. Are we going to hear the judge say anything at all? Give us something. I guess the jury is heading out. Why it goes up to the fan. So the jury cannot be seen in the small ass courtroom, which they had to change because of the jury not being able to see the witness. Because who wants the jury to see the face of the witnesses as they testify? Very interesting day in court today. I do have to say so myself. Again, sorry about the technical problems. That was a whole thing. Hopefully it never happens again. And we are out. Let me see if there's any information. Maybe there's, I don't think there would be anything on any other channel. I don't think it would still be rolling on any other channel because I believe Court TV Let's see. Right. So it just, everyone said goodbye. All right. So everyone just said goodbye. See you later. Court is done for the day. They end at 1 p.m. on Tuesdays and Thursdays. Mondays and Wednesdays is full days. I don't believe there will be court tomorrow because that's that the judge wanted to keep. No court on Fridays. They might be doing something tomorrow. If I find out that they are, I will populate a stream so that tomorrow 9 a.m. court, they didn't do, there was no court on Wednesday at all. So even though that was supposed to be a full day, very interesting. Very interesting. I don't know. This is going to be a very long trial. We lose about 2 full court days doing 2 half days and 1 day off throughout the week. We are not even through the paramedics. We have a few more to go. Wow. I don't know. Lots of questions. One question Raylene asked said, I want to know where that third woman went. Right. So we heard from the police that when they got on scene, 3 women, Jennifer, Carrie, and Karen. And that was pretty much a big thing. Now, the defense in that video that we saw, I believe it was today, earlier today, you could see someone, might have been, I don't know, my days are all mixed up and we're only a weekend, that you could see someone cross in front of the car that was in the parking lot of 34 Fairview and quite possibly go into the house. We kind of just lose view of them. So where did the third woman go, and why did the cops see it and not the paramedics? It did take about, I would probably say there's probably about like 10 minutes of space between the cops showing up and the paramedics showing up. One police officer did show up right at the same time as them. So I don't know. We hopefully will get answers on that. What did she hit him with? Also great question. Prosecution is claiming, is alleging that Karen Reed hit him with her car, that she reversed into him as she was going away as he was being dropped off at the party at 34 Fairview. And even though not a single person, all these people they didn't find any of the red taillight that was allegedly smashed when she reversed into him going like 22 to like 25 miles per hour. So yeah, very strange. The defense is alleging that this is a complete cover-up, that she did not kill him at all. Was alcohol involved? Absolutely. We will eventually hear more about that, about when Karen was taken to the hospital herself after John O'Keefe was transported to the hospital. Same hospital, different ambulance. Is so many days off a common thing? No, not that I've come across. A lot of it is not common. I would not say it's anywhere near common at all. There might be other trials that they didn't want to keep pushing either this one back or other trials back. The judge might have prior commitments to other cases, or maybe the judge wants to be able to do all the things at the same time. Like, we can get this trial done and I can continue to not push my schedule back and keep pushing other things back. So give me the afternoons on Tuesdays and Thursdays to have my hearings, to have all the things, and then give me Fridays to finish up the week and round it out so that Monday we can start trial. And then if stuff comes up, I can have my hearings on Tuesdays and Thursdays afternoons. That might be it as well. It's not common in my opinion. I'm also not a lawyer, but from what I've seen in all the trials, like watching the Johnny Depp trial, it was every damn day, so yeah, I wouldn't say it is common. I definitely think it's going to create possible issues when it comes to witnesses and their own personal schedules. It's hard to say, yeah, we'll get to you on week 3, but then you actually don't get to them until like week 5. It can be very difficult if people are flying in, especially when it comes to the experts. They don't live in Canton. They don't live in Dedham. They are professional experts and all that stuff. So I don't know. What's going to happen. I know if I was a juror, I might like it. I might love it. I might hate it. You still have the afternoons on Tuesdays and Thursdays to go into work. If you're hourly, maybe hopefully your boss is able to work with you on hours. You have all day Friday and the weekend. But it also is kind of suspicious if you're gone Mondays and Wednesdays, and you have you can only work in the afternoons on Tuesdays and Thursdays. Someone's gonna be like, you're on the jury. Like you're on the jury. So I feel like it's easily markable instead of being like, I Monday through Friday, I'm not at work. Maybe I work from home on my computer at nights and on the weekends, and I don't have to deal with the people trying to identify me as being on this specific jury. It's very interesting. I probably would hate it. I would probably rather just be like, you know what, just get it all done. 8 weeks, can we just do it? Gotcha. That makes sense. I hope that's why the judge is scheduled. I hope that's why too. Yeah, I have a feeling that that's probably what it is. She doesn't want to get incredibly behind on her own stuff, which is kind of strange because she's not really giving the prosecution too much sass when they are taking their sweet ass time talking about how are the gusts of wind? Were they constant? Were they consistent? Were they gusty? How gusty? Give me on a scale of 1 to gust. How gusty were the winds? And they're taking a lot of time. It is foundational per witness, but it is time consuming. Absolutely. She has definitely showed what I believe, in my opinion. I am not a lawyer. I do not try cases. I am not a judge. I'm not a lawyer. I have no profession in the legal system whatsoever. She is showing her bias to the defense. Against the defense, excuse me. She's showing her bias against the defense team. I have seen it. It may not be true, but it feels like it to me. She may just be kind of grumpy. The judge is a human person as well. So I don't think expecting them to not have any bias whatsoever. They're not making a decision, but I definitely am feeling a little bit of the bias. But I think it probably comes from her being a judge and also sensing some of that tonal disrespect from the defense when it comes to these particular witnesses who are police officers in the community, paramedics in the community. I feel like that might be it. I hope I'm wrong. I would very much like to be wrong and have someone else say, nope, I'm not seeing any of that whatsoever. Sure, that's totally fine. This is just my personal view from what I'm seeing. Not telling anyone how to feel about it, but that's just my opinion on what has happened the past 3 days. Like I said, if I find out we do have court tomorrow, I will populate the stream. So if you aren't subscribed, please subscribe and turn on notifications so you'll get a notification when I go live, and hopefully there won't be internet problems the next time. But other than that, do you guys like my new tattoo? Do you like my new tattoo? It's a little dino. It's not real. I can't lie to you. It's not real. It's a fakie. It's just one of those, it's just one of those like wet ones, like you just wet them and then I come off with baby oil. I just thought it was really cute. Anywho, I'm gonna head out, go get some lunch, and then go to work myself. So I hope you guys have a fantastic afternoon. If I don't see you tomorrow, have a wonderful weekend. I will be back on Monday. I'm not gonna do my normal Lily's news tomorrow just because we have we got a lot. We did a lot this week. Maybe next Friday. Yeah, so that's that. This is where Lily's news will be happening too, as well, once we kind of get in the role of things. But yeah, so that's that. Thank you guys so much for being here. Thanks for watching. I appreciate you guys so much. It's always good to see those names in the chat. My notebook is getting full of notes, and hopefully I kind of want there to be court tomorrow, because I think we need the day. But anyhow, thanks for watching. I'll see you guys next time. Be good. Like, be good out there.